Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump calls on Americans to bring religion back into their lives. More on his remarks from the bipartisan National Prayer Breakfast. Iran responds to Trump's maximum pressure campaign against the regime. Plus, we look at the potential impact of that campaign. A House subcommittee is holding a hearing on how regulatory policy affects natural disasters. That's in the wake of the devastating Los Angeles fires.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Thursday, February 6th. I'm Chris Beers. President Trump delivered remarks this morning at the annual National Prayer Breakfast at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. The more than 70-year-old Washington tradition brings together a bipartisan group of lawmakers for fellowship.
At every stage of the American story, our country has drawn hope and courage and inspiration from our trust in the Almighty. Deep in the soul of every patriot is the knowledge that God has a special plan and a glorious mission for America. And that plan is going to happen.
Trump praised key political leaders, emphasized America's deep religious heritage, and called for a national revival of faith. The president reflected on having a bullet come close to killing him at a rally in Pennsylvania last year. He told those in attendance that it changed something in him and strengthened his faith in God. He drew laughs when he expressed gratitude that the episode didn't affect his hair. Trump also addressed national security, military recruitment, and air traffic control safety, advocating for modernization. He urged political unity, stronger borders, and restoring traditional values to bring Americans together. President Trump met with the governors of Texas and California yesterday. It comes as the White House seeks to clarify the president's stance on U.S. involvement in Gaza. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
We got some more clarification from the White House a day after President Trump suggested he wants the U.S. to take over Gaza and own it. The White House says that President Trump is not planning to use American taxpayer dollars to fund reconstruction efforts in Gaza, and nor is he committed yet to send any U.S. troops there. Watch.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him.
During a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister, President Trump did not rule out sending troops as an option, saying he might if it's necessary.
Given what you've said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that.
And when asked about why President Trump would not rule out as an option, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt told us that she believes it's part of Trump's negotiating tactics and he will make a deal on that, and adding that it's to keep the option open as leverage in negotiations. And meanwhile, Trump also proposed a mass and permanent resettlement for Palestinians living in Gaza. And the White House said he's seemingly walking it back, saying that Palestinians will only need to be temporarily relocated as the reconstruction efforts play out. But the White House does stress to us, though, that the U.S. is getting involved in the reconstruction efforts, and that is to ensure stability in the region, adding that President Trump is a great deal maker and will strike a deal with regional partners. President Trump met with the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and that's as Los Angeles is still recovering from wildfire damage. And during his meeting with Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, the two talk about, of course, border security. And Governor Greg Abbott told me after their meeting that he proposed to Trump several options about what Texas can offer him in securing the border, including, he says, 4,000 jail cells to detain illegal immigrants and more border walls, as well as what he says, 2 military bases to house over 2,000 soldiers. He also told me that he told President Trump that illegal immigration in Texas has dropped to, quote, a mere trickle. And meanwhile, when it comes to the topic about Mexican troops to be deployed to the U.S. border with Mexico, Abbott told me that he expects 10,000 Mexican troops to bring an immediate end to illegal immigration. Watch. What you have seen, any progress with that?
Whenever Mexico does send troops to the border, it has an immediate impact, an immediate reduction in the number of people crossing the border illegally. In the past, I've seen 1,000 or 2,000, not 10,000. If they do that, it'll have an enormous impact, and we will see an almost immediate elimination of any illegal border crossings.
And just earlier this week, Mexico agreed to send 10,000 National Guard troops to the northern border with the U.S. and that to help the U.S. stop the flow of illegal immigration and fentanyl into the U.S. And in exchange, President Trump agreed to pause his imminent 25% tariff on Mexican goods as part of the deal. And we have news that at least 1,000 of those Mexican troops have arrived at the Mexico's northern border.
Iran's foreign minister calls President Trump's renewed maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime a failed experiment. Abbas Araghchi says trying it again will lead to another failure. Trump's February 4th maximum pressure executive order reinvigorates U.S. sanction efforts on Iran and aims to curb Iran's ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons programs. For a closer look at the foreign minister's statements, we're joined by Brandon Weichert, author of The Shadow War, Iran's Quest for Supremacy. Welcome back, Brandon. What do you make of Iran's foreign minister calling President Trump's maximum pressure campaign in his first term a failed experiment?
It's the ultimate bluster on the part of the Iranian regime. The fact of the matter is they were allowed to get away with bloody murder the last 4 years under the Biden regime. And now it's a whole new ballgame. The maximum pressure campaign in Trump's first term, paired with the Abraham Accords, was the most successful U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East in decades. And it will be successful again if the Americans can keep the Sunni Arab states, notably Saudi Arabia, in line with Israel to contain Iran.
And what do you think America has to do in order to achieve that?
Well, what we shouldn't be doing is talking about sending U.S. troops to Gaza. That is a surefire way to destabilize the Sunni Arab support for the Abraham Accords. But aside from that, what we need to be doing is we need to be creating a shared, basically, set of priorities. For instance, the Sunni Arabs, the Israelis, the Americans, all three of us want to take out the Houthis. That's an Iranian-backed group in Yemen. We should be coordinating together to do that. And that will kind of create capacity and build trust. And then from there, we should go on to asserting all three groups saying together that the one red line that if Iran crosses, we will destroy that regime for doing is if the regime in Iran gets nuclear weapons. And if that is a consolidated and concerted and consistent statement of priorities from the U.S., from the Sunni Arabs, and from Israel, we will have put Iran back into its box that it's been loosed out of since the 2003 Iraq War.
On that note about nuclear weapons, Brandon, Iran's foreign minister also said if the main concern is that Iran should not pursue nuclear weapons, this is achievable and not a complicated issue. He then cites Iran's membership in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Does this signal potential cooperation from Iran?
I think it signals that the Iranians are scared out of their minds right now because they know that Donald Trump is a hair trigger away from knocking out that regime permanently. And they're doing whatever they can. So on the one hand, they're beating their chests, showing off these new air defenses, showing off these underground facilities, threatening that they can basically surge capacity in their nuclear weapons program at levels previously unseen. And on the other hand, they're basically saying, oh, please, we can get together and make a deal. That's because the reality is that regime is brittle and it's not going to take much to push them over, and the Iranian regime knows it.
Now, the foreign minister's statements are a response to Trump's February 4th executive order reinvigorating U.S. sanctions on Iran. Part of the aim is to, quote, drive Iran's export of oil to zero. How might the regime be impacted if the U.S. succeeds at that, given what you're saying about the regime being brittle?
Well, it will hurt the economy there, but ultimately the thing that Iran has going for it is it has China as a backstop. And China gets I think China purchases upwards of 80% of Iran's oil and natural gas already. And so that's not going to negatively too much impact Iran's economy. It'll hurt a little bit, but the real issue is going to be the other points of contention with the West. And basically, the U.S. is going to use not just oil sanctions, but it's going to go across the board, maximum pressure to basically squeeze that regime. That regime will not make it if the squeezing is too hard. And I think the Iranians know that, which is why they're also saying, hey, we're part of the NPT. We can do a deal. Please, work with us. That's because they know. And so the Chinese will help them purchase oil and natural gas. But of course, the Chinese run the risk that Trump may decide to start sanctioning them if they start buying too much of the sanctioned Iranian oil, because Trump is different from Biden. He will go after China. He's already proven that.
Yeah, it's certainly a different leadership in so many different ways. I want to look at two things. How do Trump's actions on Iran so far in his second term compared to his action toward the regime during his first term? And what about the state of the regime? How does it compare? How does its current state compare to where it was when Trump took office in 2017?
Well, interestingly, Trump took over. I thought for sure we were going to be much more sort of aggressive with Iran. But the last couple of weeks since taking over, and that might just be because he's getting settled in still, there's a lot to do. Trump has sort of given a wide berth to the Iranians. But in so doing, the Iranians have sort of hung themselves out to dry because they have spent the last 2 weeks making fun of the Americans, trying to say, hey, we can actually surge capacity on nukes, don't tempt us, rebuilding and expanding their air defense network that the Israelis knocked out last year. All of these things are sending signals to Trump that Iran is a threat, which means Trump will start concentrating more on the Iranian threat, and that's not good for Iran. The Iranian regime today, politically, socially, and I would argue probably economically, is weaker than it was a decade ago or 8 years ago when Trump first took office. But the thing is, the Iranians do have a comprehensive air defense network that they are currently expanding with the help of Russia. They do have ballistic missiles that they're getting with the help of China. And they are capable of surging nuclear weapons production. But as long as their regime is brittle the way I think it is, then the maximum pressure campaign that Trump's going to enact upon them is going to be decisive for the United States and Israel.
Yeah, what do you think could come out of it this time around? I mean, we saw the Abraham Accords in Trump's first term. What are your hopes for the Middle East in Trump's second term?
Well, my hope is that we avoid a direct war with the Iranians and instead do to the Iranians what we did to the Soviets in the Cold War. We create a regional partnership with the Israelis, with the Sunni Arabs, and we contain and deter and strangle over time the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think that we need to be very careful about talking about putting boots on the ground or doing massive airstrikes on Iran, simply because, as Colin Powell told us about Iraq in 2003, if you break it, you own it. But if we do a sort of mini Cold War policy on Iran, that is probably the best solution because it allows the Iranian people to stand up and sort of take matters into their own hands. We know the regime is deeply unpopular with most Iranians. It won't take much to get a popular uprising against that regime. Another thing we need to avoid, as I noted at the top of this segment, is do not put U.S. forces in Gaza. Do not talk about owning Gaza. The Israelis can handle Gaza. They want to deal with Gaza. Let the Israelis do it. That last thing we want to do is be seen as intervening in that situation, because it will turn off Sunni Arab support for the Abraham Accords. And that is the key to stopping Iran, is the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting moment with Trump unveiling his plan for Gaza. Brandon Weichert, author of The Shadow War, Iran's Quest for Supremacy. Thank you. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
Next, LA County officials have provided an update regarding safety and recovery efforts in wildfire-affected areas. More than 6,000 households are already enrolled in debris removal programs. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Officials have provided an update on the right of entry forms for residents, addressing the potential health risk in affected areas for residents returning home, and giving an overview of the current safety conditions. Supervisor Catherine Barger shared updates on the right of entry forms, philanthropic efforts, and the Altadena Recovery Commission. So far, over 6,000 households have opted in for debris clearing, moving recovery efforts in some areas to Phase 2. Barger also outlined plans for distributing relief funds to wildfire survivors.
We are monitoring relief funds for wildlife survivors and will be advocating for your most acute needs. The county will post a list of available grant programs on our recovery relief website so residents can access them with greater ease, and that includes our small businesses.
The Los Angeles County Public Health Director urged residents near EPA cleanup sites to limit their time outdoors. For those returning home, she emphasized the potential health risks in affected areas that leave behind hazardous debris and airborne particles, including ash, soot, and smoke residue.
These materials contain dangerous substances like lead, arsenic, and heavy metals, which pose health risks, especially for children, older adults, and those with respiratory conditions.
She expressed if your home wasn't directly damaged, exposure to fine particles may affect indoor air quality. If there's no soot or smoke odor, your home is likely safe. A wipe test can check for residue. For cleaning ash or smoke-affected homes, FARA recommends wearing an N95 mask, long sleeves, pants, goggles, and gloves for protection. When cleaning outdoors, hose down outdoor patios, furniture, and windows to prevent ash from becoming airborne. For indoor surfaces, use damp cloths to wipe down walls and furniture. Dispose of ash in sealed plastic bags and covered trash bins. If there is significant soot, consider hiring professional cleaning services. Mark Pastrella, director of Los Angeles County Public Works, emphasized that the Pacific Palisades and Altadena burn areas remain unstable and high risk for residents.
The state of affairs is that the area is unstable and high risk to people. Whether you're a traveling motorist or you are a property owner, there is risk in our environment right now. Risk of bodily damage, property damage, risk to lives, and risk to the environment.
Pastrella also advised residents who live in burn scar areas to stay indoors and remain in a safe place during the rainstorms. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Next, a House Judiciary Subcommittee is discussing recent wildfires that ravaged parts of Los Angeles. Lawmakers are looking at the impact of federal regulations on natural disasters. Let's tune in.
Republicans will return to their tired old playbook and blame everything on overregulation. Today we are fortunate to be joined by Frank Freevault, a retired fire chief with actual experience on the ground fighting fires and saving lives. I'm looking forward to hearing from a true expert on how we can best help California in this hour of need. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ranking member started off his comments by saying that Republicans wanted to dismantle the regulations that keep us safe. That keep us safe? 28 Californians lost their lives. 20,000 structures were destroyed. 40,000 acres where these fires took place. And California is the most heavily regulated state in the country. We're trying to figure out how we can stop this. It's not about dismantling regulations. If regulations were going to solve the problem, they'd have been solved. Everything would have been solved in California because you got regulations more than any other place. So I appreciate the chairman bringing experts in here to tell us what's really going on. Appreciate this hearing. And to be clear, the clip that was shown by Ranking Member Nadler of President Trump was before the fires. It was clear back in September, for goodness sake. So we're going to get to the truth with our witnesses. I want to thank the chairman for this important hearing about regulatory reform that really needs to happen. And we want to make sure the regulations are in California don't come to the rest of the country, because we don't want this happening all over our great nation. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witnesses. And I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are fortunate to have with us today witnesses who know as well as anyone what has gone so wrong in my state, what has gone so wrong in the Golden State. They will share with us the titanic policy blunders and staggering failures of political leadership that have caused such harm to California and for which our citizens have paid such a high price. I believe that today's hearing can be a moment where we turn the tide and restore some sanity to California fire and water policy while issuing a warning to the rest of the country about the devastating consequences of these failed policies. As President Trump said, there can be no golden age without the Golden State. Our first witness is Steve Hilton. Now, most probably know Mr. Hilton as a British and American commentator for, among other outlets, Fox News. But he actually, back in 2010 to 2012, was the director of strategy for British Prime Minister David Cameron. And he has now brought his unique mix of brilliant strategy, passion, and a common sense approach to policy to found a nonprofit organization called Golden Together, which focuses on fixing the problems that are causing a mass exodus of people from the state of California. That mass exodus, by the way, is measurable. For 5 straight years, California has ranked #1 in the country in outbound U-Haul rentals. The greatest state in the country, most beautiful state in the country, has become the most popular state to leave. Mr. Hilton's testimony will cover the failures in leadership that have led to the lack of preparation for the fires in Los Angeles. Our second witness is someone who many of us in California know very well and whose insights we have been relying on for a long time. Mr. Stephen Greenhut is Resident Senior Fellow and Western Region Director for State Affairs at R Street Institute. He was a columnist for the San Diego Union Tribune who focused on California policy and state government. He authored the book, Winning the Water Wars: California Can Meet Its Water Needs by Promoting Abundance Rather Than Managing Scarcity. His testimony will identify many areas in which policy promises in California that were made with no follow-through from California leaders. As a California resident, he can speak to the personal impact many of these policy decisions have had on him and his family. And finally, Mr. Edward Ring, who is perhaps as knowledgeable about water and fire policy in California as just about anyone. Dr. Ring is the Director of Water and Energy Policy for the California Policy Center. He has a deep tactical knowledge of the poor decision-making of environmentalist California policymakers. He will speak directly to the prolonged environmental review process and the meddling of environmental groups that prevents proper fire mitigation and water management from happening in California. And lest anyone think that the purpose of this hearing is simply to identify problems rather than present solutions, I'd encourage you to check out Dr. Ring's written testimony in which he has literally dozens and dozens of concrete policy changes that California could make right now to improve the situation. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening this important hearing, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Nadler, to introduce the Democrat witness.
Thank you. Before I introduce our witness, I must take strong exception to what Mr. Kiley said when he said California was the most beautiful state in the Union. Obviously, New York is the most beautiful state in the Union. Chief Frevo has served since 1979 with special district, city, county, state, and federal fire agencies in roles from firefighter to fire chief. He holds an MS from Oklahoma State University in Fire and Emergency Management Administration and currently serves as the director of the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Institute at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Frank is an SME for the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation Wildfire Advisory Council and previously served as a senior policy advisor to the Western Fire Chiefs Association with an emphasis on the development of resilient wildland urban interface communities. His work is grounded in aligning key stakeholders around a core set of parcel and community level mitigations that will disrupt the fire pathways which lead to conflagration. He is pursuing the actuarial evaluation of risk mitigations for both the public and private sectors because we share the same desired outcome, minimizing property loss to the peril of wildfire. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We want to welcome the witnesses and certainly thank you for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and you can be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes today. Mr. Greenhut, you may begin.
Chairman Fitzgerald, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of the subcommittee. My name's Stephen Greenhut. I'm Western Region Director for the R Street Institute, a free market think tank, and have written extensively about California issues for newspapers and books for the past 27 years. I love the state and want to see it prosper. One of the common themes in my writing has been the state's commitment to expanding bureaucracy and regulation without much regard for whether the new programs accomplish their stated goals. But the Los Angeles wildfires have exposed festering regulatory hurdles that have exacerbated the crisis. Many are years in the making, maddeningly complex, and not given to quick solutions. It's a confluence of bad policy involving brush clearance, water, insurance, firefighting, housing, and climate change. California has created a tangled web of regulation that renders this once innovative state incapable of accomplishing anything efficiently, even environmental protection. Consider California's extensive climate change agenda. Instead of building a resilient system that handles whatever Mother Nature throws our way, our state constantly uses it as an excuse for inaction on nuts and bolts issues. By the way, uncontrolled wildfires undermine whatever progress we're making in reducing carbon dioxide emissions. University of Chicago research found that the 2020 wildfires emitted close to double the state's emissions reductions achieved over 16 years. The governor has agreed that we need to step up brush clearance, but very little happens. The California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and other laws require environmental impact reports for clearance projects and 2 to 3 approvals for controlled burns. They can take years. The state could, for instance, consider using more funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to pay for this, rather than prioritizing a high-speed rail system that's unlikely to do much about the climate. It's always an issue of priorities. The wildfires have also highlighted California's counterproductive insurance regulations. I've been writing for years about the coming insurance catastrophe. It can take many months, close to a year, for insurers to wade through the process of hearings, rate reviews, and opposition to such hikes by consumer attorney interveners who earn large fees for their efforts. The problem goes back to Proposition 103, the 1988 ballot initiative that instituted the prior approval system for rate increases and rolled back rates. It created a price control system. Unable to easily adjust rates to reflect risk, insurers quietly, and then not so quietly, began exiting. The insurance commissioner crafted a suite of useful reforms that were showing some promise, but why did it take so long? With this catastrophic wildfire, it remains to be seen whether these changes will be enough to stop the continued exodus of insurers. Many homeowners in the LA area didn't have coverage or were relying on the state-created insurer of last resort, the FAIR Plan, and there's much talk of that bare-bones system facing possible insolvency. Rather than addressing the insurance emergency, the governor and lawmakers found time for a performative special legislative session about so-called oil industry price gouging. Again, it's about priorities. Water policy is a tangential issue related to wildfires, but California has built little new water infrastructure since the 70s, when the population was roughly half what it is today. The state passed a major water bond a decade ago, but we've seen little progress on building traditional infrastructure projects. The California Coastal Commission in 2022 even rejected a privately funded desalination plan in Huntington Beach over concerns about plankton. More water would not have stopped the wildfires, but additional water resources would bolster firefighting efforts and mitigate some of the effects of drought seasons. Instead of building the basic water infrastructure prioritized under the Pat Brown administration, recent administrations have focused almost solely on conservation and rationing. Yet approximately 50% of California's water flows to the Pacific, 40% is used for agriculture, and 10% is for urban uses. Limiting swimming pools and car washing is no solution. We've seen criticisms about an inadequate number of firefighters. Thanks to union power, we see abundance of LA firefighters earning total compensation packages above $500,000 a year, with one captain earning more than $900,000 a year. If pay reflected market rates, California state government and municipalities could afford to hire more of them. Finally, I want to touch on California's cumbersome building regulations, which are a notable hurdle in the rebuilding process. Thankfully, the governor issued an executive order suspending CEQA and the Coastal Act, but why has it taken disaster? State officials have relaxed some rules for arenas and high-density housing, but not in a far-reaching matter. Little by little, California has built up a massive administrative state. I'm hoping the heartbreaking nature of the wildfires will finally cause state officials to rethink this failed approach. Thank you for your time.
You may begin.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, Chairman Fitzgerald, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to appear today to testify regarding California fires and the consequences of over-regulation. My name is Edward Ring, and I'm the Director of Energy and Water Policy for the California Policy Center, a nonpartisan public policy research institute. My observations over the past decade have led me to the conclusion that many of you may share. Over-regulation over-regulation in California has made the state unaffordable to middle-class and low-income families. It has also endangered our lives, our homes, and our communities, and has harmed the environment at least as much as it has helped. Today's hearing centers on the consequences of over-regulation in California, with a specific focus on the recent and catastrophic wildfires that consumed thousands of homes in Los Angeles and cost many lives. While no amount of preventive measures or properly applied firefighting resources can stop all of the wildfires in our state, their frequency and their severity is a consequence of over-regulation. The regulations most damaging to our forests are, ironically, justified by misguided environmentalist values. Because of environmentalist regulations and litigation, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, the California Endangered Species Act, and their federal equivalents, California's annual timber harvest is down to 1.5 billion board feet a year, 25% of what it was as recently as the 1980s. These and other environmental laws have nearly killed our logging industry while also making it much harder to do prescribed burns or graze. These forests are dried out, unhealthy, because there are now at least 3 times as many trees, at least 3 times as many trees per acre than the natural density, competing for limited light, water, and soil nutrients. There is an alternative. For example, in 2020, the Creek Fire burned 380,000 acres in the Central Sierra Mountains, but 20,000 acres in the middle of that fire, the watershed around Shaver Lake, didn't burn at all. That's because for several decades, the owners practiced what they call total ecosystem management. They used prescribed burns, mechanical thinning, grazing, and selective logging to manage their forest. Wildlife biologists who were on site claimed that species counts in the area actually exceed levels found in forests where state regulations have banned logging. These practices need to be extended to all wildland in California, and in the wildland-urban interface, Los Angeles in particular, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy ought to completely reprioritize their actions to first ensure reducing fire risk. California is only 5% urbanized, and that is where 94% of our state's population lives. We have the most densely populated urban areas of any state in America. The point here is that our state has plenty of open space and wilderness. Going to extreme lengths to return ecosystems to an untouched natural state is not appropriate along the perimeter of a city with 10 million people. And in any case, our government at all levels has not outperformed private landowners in preserving habitat. California state government has enacted regulations and enabled litigation that rewards special interests while costing taxpayers literally hundreds of billions of dollars. Environmental regulations make housing unaffordable, leaving subsidized developers to inadequately fulfill a mission that the private sector can do. We pay higher utility rates to subsidize renewables. We have carbon sequestration, carbon offset trading, carbon accounting. We have environmental litigation as a business model. Entire new industries created by political decree producing nothing of value. This disaster in Los Angeles is a clarifying moment. The leaders running California today can allow a deregulated private sector to create millions of good jobs delivering abundant energy, water, lumber, and housing, including rebuilding the lost homes in Los Angeles at a price normal people can afford. Or we can ration our water and energy and land, expecting the government to subsidize millions of households that can no longer afford the essentials. We can manage our environment and expand our suburbs, redefining what constitutes a reasonable environmental impact. Or we can retreat into high-density urban cores and pretend the entire Earth should be turned back over to nature. I am including in my written testimony a list of laws that should be repealed, regulations that should be scrapped, and strategies whereby California, hopefully with the help from the federal government, can save our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ring. Mr. Hilton, you may begin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all your colleagues for giving me the opportunity to be here today. My comments reflect both the policy work that I've done that Mr. Kiley mentioned at my organization Golden Together, specifically 2 reports which I'd like to draw your attention to, reducing California's carbon emissions through modern forest management, and secondly, water abundance. But my comments also reflect more recent conversations with firefighters in Los Angeles, retired firefighters across the state, and the victims of this disaster. And I have to say to the ranking member, those victims will be offended by the remarks we just heard, which were frankly outrageous and offensive, preposterously claiming that the regulations keep us safe. It is the regulations that put Californians in danger, as we have all been highlighting. It's described sometimes, this disaster, as a natural disaster. It is not a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster. More precisely, a Democrat-made disaster. That is not hyperbole. That is the only plausible explanation for the impact here. We are still waiting, of course, to understand the ignition, what precisely ignited these fires. But the impact, there's no question that it was the direct result of Democrat policy and Democrat appointments to the bureaucracies who implemented those policies. As we've been hearing, fire is a natural part of life in these areas that burned. That is not new. We have had fires for decades. We have had fire prevention for decades. But in the last 2 decades, that kind of sensible fire prevention was blocked by Democrat policy. We have heard a lot as we've watched these disasters unfold about containment. What does containment mean? It doesn't mean putting out the fires. It means clearing the perimeter, fuel management, fire prevention. That is what's actually happening. Bulldozers and firefighters with axes. There's a simple question. We can do that before these fire disasters, or we can do it after. The choice that Democrats have made is to force it to be done by our brave firefighters after the event instead of preventively beforehand. Let's be specific. There was an article in the New York Times about Philip and Claire Vogt, who designed and built one of the most fire-resistant homes in America on a peak in the Santa Monica Mountains. Quote, "For months, Philip had been volunteering to clear away the dead undergrowth on the parkland surrounding his property, but California officials told him he could be fined for meddling with a sensitive habitat." Who are these California officials? Number 1, CARB, the California Air Resources Board. In 2000, they issued new smoke management regulations that effectively prohibited the kind of controlled burns that were the norm for decades before. As we were hearing, the California Coastal Commission prohibiting sensible fire prevention measures to save a Bronton's milkvetch shrub, which they claim is endangered. And worst of all, as we were hearing, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, every single firefighter that I spoke to in Los Angeles said, what are these people doing, stopping us from taking the sensible steps to keep our communities safe? This is the direct result of overregulation. And I could go on. In 2020, Senate bill in the California legislatures, SB 182, would have mandated fire prevention and resilience, including evacuation routes, vegetation management, fire-safe construction. It was vetoed by Governor Newsom. Here is a quote from his veto letter. It fails to account for the consequences that could increase sprawl. So yet again, you have sensible fire prevention blocked by overregulation because of ideology about the war on single-family homes that's being waged in California. On and on, every single aspect of this disaster, the failures that led up to it, the failures of response, all of it the result of Democrat policy. Who else is there to blame? Who else has been in charge in Los Angeles and across the state of California in these years? So now we have some demands. We have demands from the people affected who never want to see this happen again. Number one, any support from Congress for what's happened must include a requirement for their sensible reforms, the common sense measures that we have outlined here and is in the policy reports that we put before you. Safeguards to make sure this money, the federal money, is spent properly, any money. Just as we saw with the 9/11 victim compensation, we need a special master appointed to make sure that money is not wasted. And finally, there is a bill on the desk of Governor Newsom right now for Trump-proofing California, even as he goes to the office and begs for help for his state. Surely a condition of any support must be for Governor Newsom to veto that bill.
Mr. Elton, thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Freiwald, you may begin.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Frank Freevolt. I'm the current director of the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Institute at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. My opinions today are mine. They don't not necessarily represent the CSU system. To the experience and education that was covered initially, I'd like to add that of my time serving in the fire service, 19 of those years were in California. 24 of those years were outside of California. I think this will be important as we look at
Mr. Freiwald, can you speak up just a little bit, please?
Make sure your mic's on.
The mic's on.
Is that better? Very good. My apologies. I'm a soft talker. As I said, my name is Frank Freevolt. I am the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Institute Director at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. My comments today aren't mine. They do not necessarily represent those of the CSU, California State University. My experience that was discussed earlier, I want to make clear that about half of that has been inside of California and about half of it has been outside of California. Additionally, the comments that I'll make are informed by my service on the Western Fire Chiefs Association, which represents the states of Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, and Oregon. And I also have a multi-state mitigation alignment project underway that mitigations for wildland urban interface properties that involves California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Colorado, Idaho, and Arizona. We are setting out really to solve two problems. The first is unacceptable levels of life and property loss in the wildland urban interface. When we talk about interface, just like we have oceans and land connecting at the coastline, think of the interface as where combustible vegetation meets urban centers. So when we say interface, that's really the intent. The second thing that we are solving for is an impending national financial crisis that will cascade from the insurance market to the realty, mortgage lending, and general obligation municipal bond markets, in my opinion. There is understandably a lot of polarization on this issue. What I can tell you from my time working in the field on these types of disasters is that we need to reframe how we approach this going forward. And I would suggest we do it in the following ways. First, this is an urban conflagration problem. It is not a wildfire problem. It starts as a wildfire problem through embers entering communities and the reception of those communities on buildings. This is well understood through Jack Cohen's work. Second, this is a national problem. It is not just a California problem. Lahaina, Hawaii, the Marshall Fire in Colorado, Calf Canyon Hermit's Peak Fire in New Mexico. This one usually surprises people, unless they lived back there or here. The Gatlinburg fires from 2016. 2,460 structures, 17,000 acres. You don't normally think about that happening there. And it's not just here. Essentially, if you look at the globe, 30 degrees north and south of the equator, Spain, Greece, Chile, Australia, New Zealand. This is not just our issue. Unfortunately, we can learn from those as well. Another reframing is that while climate accelerated this issue, that's really just two of the three primary issues. One is an accumulation of fuel since roughly 1910 due to national policy that made sense at the time, led to unintended consequences. And the second is continued development into fire-dependent landscapes. These landscapes have a return interval that needs to be met. And the third is that while this issue has state and federal consequences, it is always a local government issue. And unless we reframe our approach to the questions and the answers, looking forward into what's coming versus looking backward into what has happened, we're going to continue to pursue things that are not going to be relevant to changing towards the outcomes that we need. I'd give you three things that I think we should commit to. First is we need to prioritize selective management of combustible vegetation within 1/2 mile of wildland urban interface communities above all other vegetation management actions. It's not to their exclusion, but it's that we need to prioritize those spaces. The second is that we need to retroactively harden existing structures in wildland urban interface communities through evidence-based mitigations and create and maintain defensible space around those structures. And to clarify, mitigations mean the various actions that you can take to make these structures less receptive, first and foremost, to embers, and later to structure spread. And third, we need to require the evidence-based mitigations are included in the part of the actuarial pricing of risk and insurance rate setting. We know enough now about those relative contributions to the disruption of fire pathways to understand their value. And I'll end with the first time I understood we had a serious disconnect is I had some property owners that passed our defensible space inspection brilliantly and had a non-renewal before the week was up. And I realized at that point how the fire service and how the insurance industry were looking at the same place, were not connected. And that's where I think we need to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freibald. We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. The chair I recognize myself for a number of questions starting out. The tragedy of recent fires in Los Angeles will undoubtedly made worse by some of the policies that make it impossible for California to manage longstanding fire risks inherent to the state. So, Mr. Ring, let me start with you. Why do you think there is such a resistance to these common sense approaches that many have just heard about this morning, and certainly have been hearing about since the fires happened in LA?
I can't think of a harder question to answer. I find it inexplicable. I do think that some of the motivation for the litigation, for example, that we see against sensible wildland management comes as an economic motive. Again, the regulatory and legal environment, because of these laws, are such that it's very easy to file a lawsuit to try to break any project that's going to develop land or manage wildland. So I think a lot of it would have to do with that. I also think that there is a preoccupation with climate change that sort of diverts people from looking at, I think, what Steve referred to as the nuts and bolts. If you're truly concerned about climate change, you should be wanting to pursue sensible policies with more urgency, not less. So I think it's partly ideology, and I think it's partly some perverse incentives caused by the legal environment that we've created.
So what could the federal government do? What kind of steps could we take to ensure that all states, including California, have less roadblocks to mitigate?
An act of Congress could, for example, make losers pay in frivolous lawsuits that have to do with environmental issues. I think that would be a reform that would cut across every law or regulation that's being exploited currently. Whereas if you, for example, reform the Endangered Species Act, which is also necessary, and reforming NEPA is also necessary. But if you also assign a responsibility to litigants that that file frivolous lawsuits, you would take care of every regulation that's being exploited in that manner.
Do you think there's anything that we're seeing and experiencing with the fires in California that would lead you to maybe scrutinize some of the statutes at the state level in other states that also experience forest fires, wildfires that California just experienced? That makes sense, that there is a state to look towards to maybe fine-tune what's going on in California?
Well, I can say that in California, it would probably be helpful to take away the waivers that permit California to enact all kinds of laws that go well in excess of federal regulations. As far as an example of a state that's managing their wildlands more responsibly, I can't answer that with specific knowledge, but I think that in the southeastern United States, a lot of forest management is done in a way that makes a lot more sense.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Greenhut, let me ask you, many states require that state insurance commissioner has to approve a rate increase before it takes effect. The fast rate approvals are a crucial component of healthy state insurance markets. Many of us that served in state legislature worked in that area. So is there something that you're seeing that stands out when it comes to California that's lacking in this area, or some of the moves or changes that have been made as a result of trying to better position themselves and unfortunately failing when it comes to insurance rates?
There are about 12 states with prior approval systems, and California's is the strictest. You pointed out in your opening that, well, for one thing, it made the insurance commissioner an elected position. There aren't a lot of insurance commissioners, often are looking to higher office, who want to be the person who approved a major rate hike. And the problem is, this has been going on for years. We're not able to just adjust the rates and their process. There are things that could be done within the Prop 103 process. We could speed up the rate approval process, and California is notoriously slow for that. And it's supposed to, by the initiative, these rate reviews are supposed to take place within 60 to 180 days, and the average is somewhere like 293 days. And then, there's one example. We have these interveners who are consumer attorneys, and one of their consumer watchdog is one of them, and their predecessor group wrote the initiative, and they earn substantial fees, essentially opposing any sort of rate increase, and that that just drags it out. There's one quick example.
I think we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit further on that issue.
Sure.
So I'm going to yield back, and I'm going to recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I first must respond to Mr. Hilton's inflammatory comments on my statement. Rules that prevent people's roofs from burning, rules that get rid of inflammatory material around homes, rules that mean that the house next door is less of a fire threat to your own. These are rules that save lives. Blanket deregulation would heighten fire risk, not lower it. We have heard claims from Republicans, including President Trump, that the water systems in California were strained because of overregulation. But with the exception of one small reservoir that was down for scheduled maintenance, the reservoirs were full when the fire started. According to some estimates, when the Palisades fire started, there were 3 million gallons of water stored locally. But the demand to fight the fires was 4 times greater than the system had ever encountered. The widespread and simultaneous use of hydrants across the affected area did cause water pressure to drop, but as experts have explained, quote, hydrants are designed for fighting fires at 1 or 2 houses at a time, not hundreds. As one expert in the field observed, quote, we have really no lack of water. What we have is an infrastructure that is not made to fight cataclysmic fires, biblical-sized fires. Director Freevolt, for these large-scale urban fires like ones in Eaton and Palisades, would you say that these are once-in-a-career fires?
Thank you for the question. Initially, when I started, maybe. But we can look at, you have plenty of access to the history and records and severity of wildland urban interface fire institutes or incidents. They're certainly on a rise. But I would also mention that to date, our largest acreage, life and property losses actually occurred a long time ago. First one was, at least it was recorded in this way, 1871 in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. That was burned somewhere between 1.5 million to 2.4 million acres. Between 1,200 to 2,500 people were killed. It jumped Green Bay. 16 towns were burned in that process.
Thank you. I have one other question. After large fires like these, we should be doing everything we can to help people in need, not pointing fingers and trying to blame elected leaders. You made a number of recommendations, but what would be most helpful to the people of California during this difficult time?
Well, right now we need to focus on the recovery part, for sure. As we move forward, I'll go back to the 3 concurrent integrated actions that I mentioned in my opening statement. We have to prioritize selective management of fuel treatment immediately around wildland urban interface communities. We need to retroactively harden the existing inventory of structures. And we need to require evidence-based mitigations to be included in the pricing of risk.
Thank you. I now yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from California, Mr. Liu, who can speak to the devastation and the need for disaster relief funds.
Thank you, Ranking Member Nadler, for using your time. Thank you, Chairman Fitzgerald, for letting me attend. Mr. Hilton, are you a firefighter?
I'm not a firefighter.
Mr. Ring, are you a firefighter? Mr. Ring, it's just a yes or no question. Mr. Ring, are you a firefighter? No. All right, Mr. Greenhut, are you a firefighter?
I'm not a firefighter.
The northern part of my district was evacuated. I've talked to numerous firefighters. I've visited the intensive damage. I've had multiple briefings from firefighters, first responders, and fire chiefs. This is what they told me. The reason these fires in Southern California spread so quickly, caused so much damage, was because of Santa Ana winds that reached unprecedented gusts of 100 miles per hour. Gusts so high that helicopters and the airplanes could not fly. Also because of very low relative humidity and the driest conditions in California history. None of the firefighters said it was about overregulation or homeless people or the Delta spelt fish or the timber harvest or voter ID laws. So shame on anyone who is exploiting the pain and suffering of disaster victims to jam through partisan ideological policies. We should get disaster aid to these disaster victims now without conditions, just like we treat every other disaster victim across America. We just gave aid this past December to South Carolina, Florida, Oklahoma. The Democrats say, hey, we want you to do better on climate change policies in your state. No, we just gave that aid because these are Americans who are suffering. So do not exploit them. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Ranking member has a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the majority is having this hearing on California fires without the participation of members who represent the Palisades and Eaton, I seek unanimous consent to enter statements from Representatives Chu and Sherman into the record.
Without objection, we now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we're all here trying to learn more about how to prevent these situations from developing in the future. And I want to just, first of all, thank all of you for being on the panel today and sharing. And I want to address a question to Mr. Stephen Greenhut, if I may. Recently, areas in my own home state of North Carolina that were devastated by Hurricane Helene are now dealing with wildfires ourselves. Unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, the aftermath of the storm's destruction has been providing fuel for these fires. And I want to talk for a moment about the concept of utilizing controlled burns to mitigate wildfires. I know there are prescribed burn projects that happen in my district, and I think it's important that they continue, but it's my understanding that implementing prescribed burns has become more difficult due to the regulations in California. And Mr. Greenhut, are there significant barriers that exist in California to exercising these prescribed burns? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, the California Environmental Quality Act, which continues to come up, CEQA, it just imposes enormous hurdles and delays to doing any sort of project. So when we had these horrific wildfires up in Paradise in Butte County, after the fires, it took 2 years before the county was even able to let out contracts for brush clearance. There was a previous fire where it took 18 months, I believe, to get a CEQA approval to do some brush clearance, and the community was destroyed shortly thereafter. So CEQA is a huge hurdle for everything. And one of the points about CEQA, we hear a lot that, we need these regulations to protect the environment. But the CEQA delays and lawsuit process doesn't help the environment. I was just looking up 49% of lawsuits, CEQA lawsuits, are public projects, and many of them are environmental projects, including parks, university housing, renewable energy. 80% of them are infill projects, which are, a lot of people in California say we need more of those to deal with climate change, and yet the lawsuits target those projects. And 64% of the lawsuits are from associations such as unions without having which don't have a history of environmental activism. So in other words, they use them to secure wage concessions. So is this helping the environment? And if we're slowing prescribed burns and brush clearance, and we've done very little. We're supposed to do about, according to CAL FIRE, about 1 million acres of clearance a year on federal and state land, and have been doing around 125,000 acres a year. And the governor said we need to do more of it. It's just we haven't seen more of it. And so yes.
Well, and that was going to be a follow-up question. I understand that Governor Newsom publicly committed to step up the rate of mechanical thinning and prescribed burns in order to clean up the excessive fuel in the forest. And again, I'll just ask you, has Governor Newsom followed through on that commitment at this point?
Well, I agree with what he's saying needs to be done. What I'm looking at is that we have all these bureaucratic hurdles. So I think even if a governor issues an executive order, everything still gets just gummed up in the works. And that's kind of what I want to address, is some of these long-term regulatory issues, not the short-term partisan issues. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and I want you to use the balance of the time. If you were in charge of setting policy related to forest management and prescribed burns, what changes would you make?
Well, I think the focus, since I'm not an expert in forest clearance, is dealing with CEQA. I mean, that is an impediment to everything. And our state, whenever there's a project our state needs to, some lawmaker wants to get through, such as the Kings Arena in Sacramento, what's the first thing they do? A CEQA exemption. State has offered CEQA exemptions on different high-density housing projects. I agree with that. It's just that we need to do it in a far-reaching manner so that all sorts of projects are spared the delays, the added costs, and often developers and public agencies don't even propose projects because they know it's going to lead to lawsuits and years of litigation and higher costs.
Well, and again, let me just say in closing, I want to thank all of you on the panel for what you're sharing. I don't think anybody is here to exploit anything today. I think we're here because we want to get the takeaways that can help us prevent anything like this from happening again. Certainly, I feel that way for my own home state of North Carolina and others around the country. So thank you, gentlemen, for sharing.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I appreciate the remark of the gentleman from North Carolina that we should not be here to engage in political rhetoric and exploitation of these terrible events. States, counties, localities all over America are affected by weather calamities that are coming on with extraordinary velocity because of climate change. I want to yield to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Liu, several minutes in order to pursue his line of questions.
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin. So the majority's witnesses, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Ring, and Mr. Greenhut, are not firefighters. But thank goodness we do have a firefighter on this panel today, Mr. Freevolt, who not only was a firefighter, he was a fire chief. And he, in his testimony, talks about that this is not a traditional wildfire. This is a wildland-urban conflagration. And I'm going to show you in a little bit a video of what was happening. But I just want to explain, when you solve for the wrong problem, not only do you not get the solution, you can cause harm. So Donald Trump has it in his mind that somehow there's a spigot in Northern California, he's going to open a valve and dump water to Southern California. Here are the facts. Southern California's reservoirs are at near record levels when this fire happened. Didn't matter, because Donald Trump then ordered the Army Corps of Engineers to release over 2 billion gallons of water that almost flooded farmland, if not for the local water districts that pushed back. But guess what? This water was saved for the farmers for the summer season when they needed the water. And so the president wasted all this water that isn't even reaching Southern California. It's going to evaporate for a PR stunt. So this was a harmful, ludicrous action to solve for the wrong problem. And so I want to show a video now of what was happening in the Eaton fire that wiped out Altadena. Just watch this 15-second video. That is not a timber harvest problem, not a desalinization problem, not a homeless person problem, not a voter ID problem. That is burning embers being blown by unprecedented Santa Ana winds that reach up to 100 miles per hour. And these burning embers that could be softball size would fly for miles and miles and miles and hit a structure and set that structure on fire. And then that structure became the fuel for the fire. That's what was happening. The structures became the fuel for the fire. And so, Mr. Freevolt, can you talk about, first of all, confirm that that is true, and then explain in your testimony about strengthening sort of these structures with fire-resistant materials?
Concur with what you said initially. Repeat the last part of your question, please.
In your testimony, you talk about how to harden some of these structures with fire-resistant materials, which actually is something that might make sense, not for the other random policies that the majority of witnesses are trying to jam through on ideological reasons.
I would point to two standing sets of work that we could start on yesterday. The first is the Wildfire Prepared Home designation from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure, natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now, Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. on food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one, get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one, get one free offer goes away.
Welcome back. I'm Don Ma. You were just watching before the break the House Judiciary Subcommittee hearing on the impact of federal regulations following the California wildfires. We're now switching gears a bit. President Trump delivered remarks this morning at the National Prayer Breakfast. Here's a recap of the speech.
Well, thank you very much. That's a big group of people. That's a nice group. Well, we want to bring religion back stronger, bigger, better than ever before. Very important, and this is a good start. This is really good. We have to have religion, and it suffered greatly over the last few years, but it's coming back. It's coming back strong, and I want to thank you, Pastor Paula, who I have known for a long time. She's a fantastic person, and thanks to the thousands of believers here today from all across the country and from all around the world. This is a beautiful tradition. They told me I could do it via Skype. And I said, what are we doing? And they said, the prayer breakfast. I said, I've been there every year. I'm not doing it via Skype. Right? Via Skype. I'm going to be there. It's not that far, you know, it's like about 2 minutes down the road. In fact, it was easier to do this than put up a Skype deal. Just destroy the White House, putting up all that stuff. But now I want to be here with you. And I have been here with you. Thank you. And I do that despite the fact that they say I can't run again. That's the expression. Sure. Then somebody said, I don't think you can. Oh. Now, I want to be with you regardless, and it's an honor, and it's something I've enjoyed. I've actually met some very nice Democrats here. It's true. I have. But this is a beautiful tradition that started with President Eisenhower in 1953, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. After 4 long years, really, they were very long, dark years, in my opinion. It's great to be back at the prayer breakfast, and I hope you all agree it's nice to once again have a president that shows up to the prayer breakfast. And that agrees to be interviewed for the Super Bowl. I'm doing that too. They haven't done it in so long, they forgot about it. They said, oh, but they hadn't done it in years. But I said, yeah, this morning they wanted to know. And I said, yeah, why not? What the hell? You know the way I look at it? They ask you a question and you give them an answer. It's not that hard. But they didn't show up for years, so they were almost shocked when I said, yeah, I'll do it, why not? But I want to thank our great newly confirmed Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who's fantastic, by the way, for being here this morning. I don't know is he around? Where is he? Where is he? He's right there. Right there. It's hard to see. With the lights, I can't, there you are. You are a handsome devil. He's a good-looking guy. He's got an even better-looking wife, I can tell you that. But I want to thank you and Catherine you've been fantastic. I knew immediately, he was running in a group of people, and I spotted him immediately. I said, that guy's a winner. He didn't get the gravitas, because to get gravitas, you have to be controversial and, in many cases, a horrible human being. You get a lot of gravitas that way, and he's a very good human being and very smart. But I said, he is really outstanding, and he's going to do a job with Chris Wright. Two of them, it's like a partnership with Interior and Energy. He's going to have more liquid gold coming out of the ground than anybody's ever seen before. We're going to drive the price down, and everything else is going to follow. So he's one of the really important people. He was a very, very, very great gentleman, was a fantastic governor, by the way, and really did do, and sort of learned the oil business as a governor, because he made his money, made a lot of money, which I like. I like people that make money, because that means they can help us. And they always like me to put in really people that have failed. They want, please, sir, he's made too much money and he's become too successful. They want me to hire people that have totally failed to run Department of Energy. Somebody that lost all his life, I don't want to do, I just don't want to do it. I know it sounds nice, but I want to get somebody that was so successful, because we got to bring the country back, and him and Chris are going to be unbelievable. I really believe it. But I want to thank you very much, Doug, for what you've gone through. He's gone through a lot, too. But he was easily approved, because he's an honest person. He gave a statement, they read it, they said thank you. But as well as our co-chairs, Representatives Ben Klein and Jonathan Jackson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, fellas. Right. Congressman Eric Burleson and visiting dignitaries from more than 120 countries. From the very beginning of our republic, America has always been a nation founded by people of faith and strengthened by the power of prayer, and united by four simple but very beautiful words: in God we trust. And you all know there was a movement to get that out. I said, no, wait, don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. I don't want to hear it. There was a movement. We don't want that, because we shouldn't be mentioning God. You know, there was a very strong movement, just like they don't want to say Merry Christmas, but now they say it. Remember in 2016, I was a whole big part of my campaign. You're going to say Merry Christmas. Well, now they do it again. But we... I don't know if you've been watching, but we got rid of woke over the last 2 weeks. Woke is gonzo. Despite the other side stealing hundreds of millions of dollars to promote woke. Did you see what happened yesterday, where they found hundreds of millions of dollars of money was fraudulently given to newspapers and, I guess, Politico? I don't know, they're here. Good, I hope you're enjoying your breakfast. No, they gave money to all this out of U.S. aid, right? USAID. It came out hundreds of just tremendous amounts of money, had nothing to do with anything. This is a terrible thing that was experienced, but we're catching them left and right. We're catching them. We're catching them to a point where they don't know what the heck is going on. They can't believe they're getting caught. And I have great respect for the people that are doing it. Elon Musk is helping us on it. And he's pretty good. He's pretty good. He's pretty good at it. But the numbers are astounding. They're astounding. Even Doug was shaken up by what he heard. Do you believe that, Doug, what you've been reading? It's just very dishonest stuff. But it was faith that led the pilgrims to cross an ocean and settle this majestic continent, and we're going to keep it majestic. It was belief in our Creator that moved the patriot farmers to stand strong for their liberties at Concord Bridge 250 years ago this April, and we're going to have a big party next year. And we have the Olympics coming in, and we have the World Cup coming in, and we have the 250th year celebration, all three. And you know, when I was president, I got the Olympics and I got the World Cup. 250 years I had nothing to do with, just happened to be. But it all came due the presidency after what should have been mine, really should have been. And they had a little election that, let's just say, didn't work out too correctly. A lot of things have been found out about that. But so I got forced to run again, and I ran again. And now I have the Olympics, I have the World Cup, and I have 250. So I said, this is interesting, you know. When I got them, I said, you know, the only bad thing about the Olympics is I won't be president. The only bad thing about getting the World Cup, I worked hard to get the World Cup because everybody wants it. Everybody wants the Olympics. But the only bad thing was I said, you know, I won't be president, and I might not, you know, when you're not president, you might not even be invited. I said, isn't it sad? Then all of a sudden I run and I win, and then somebody says, sir, you're going to have to start thinking about the Olympics. I said, you know, you're right. I never thought about that during the campaign. I'm going to be here for the Olympics and the World Cup. How about that? God works in very strange ways. But we had a great election. We won by a massive majority. Won all 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by millions and millions of people. We have a mandate, and some say the most consequential election in 129 years. And that's good because I'm a believer, like you're a believer, and we want to have a believer in this position. And it was confidence in America's God-given destiny that pushed the pioneers to journey west and led Americans to end slavery, crush fascism, defeat communism, and conquer every single challenge that we faced. And they were very great challenges. Now it's the same time, we have to remember, unyielding faith in America's mission that inspires us to make our country great again. And soon it will be greater than ever. We're doing really well. We're doing really well. It's, I think in 2 weeks they're saying, I'm reading it, so I'm not even saying it, but I feel it, that we've done more than just about any president ever. The first 2 weeks have been probably, they say, the most successful 2 weeks in the history of any presidency. Now all we have to do is keep it going for another couple of 100 weeks. But it's been very successful. And if this guy gets a lot of oil out of the ground to bring down everybody's prices, it'll even be better. So, Doug, you shouldn't even be here right now. You should be, get out of here, Doug. Start looking for oil. After years of decline, Americans are reasserting our true identity as a people ordained by God to be the freest and most exceptional nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. But we weren't that for 4 years. I don't believe we were. And we're getting there very soon, very quickly. I'll be able to say it, and we'll be able to say it again. As I said in my inaugural address 2 weeks ago, a light is now shining over the world, the entire world. And I'm hearing it from other leaders. I'm hearing it from leaders that have traditionally not been on our side, that there's so much more, there's such a good feeling in the air, so different than it was just a short time ago. Because here in America, we are once again a nation that believes in ourselves. We believe in our destiny and trusts in the providence of Almighty God. And I can tell you the opposite side, the opposing side, and they oppose religion, they oppose God. They've lost their confidence. They've lost their confidence. It's a different group of people than I remember. Over the past 2 weeks, our strength has been restored, our spirit has been revived, and a new national momentum has been sweeping across our land. The golden age of America has officially begun. And I will tell you, I just read it this morning, a statistic just came out that in the last 15 years, we just broke the record, Army recruitment, and they think it's going to be 25 years, but right now it's 15, more than 15. Army recruitment has gone up. You've probably been reading that it's been way down in the dumps. And recruitment's the highest it's been in more than 15 years, and that's going to get higher, and it could be 25 years, but that's going to get higher and higher. And that's a tremendous thing. That's a tremendous thing, and a poll came out that the spirit of the country is up 49%. Where did you hear that? That's a record that's never gone up. And that's gone up over just since the election, since November 5th. What a great day. Was that a great day? Was that great? because we're going to make our country great again. After years of stagnation, our economy is roaring back to life. Optimism is soaring. Hope is returning. And we have brought back the words common sense to our government. We had a big day yesterday. You saw that, having to do with men in women's sports. No longer. It's over. But we're going to be securing our borders, defending our freedoms, and restoring the principle of meritocracy. Merit. We're a merit-based country again. And we have a Supreme Court ruling to that effect. Nobody thought that was going to happen. That was a great ruling. It didn't get the kind of notoriety that other things get, but in its own way, it was just about as important as anything. It gave us the right to go back to a merit-based. We're a merit-based country now. It's based on competence, intelligence, and based on ability and all of the things that really can make a country great. Around the world, America is being respected again, and you are already witnessing some very incredible results. Just days before taking office, my team negotiated a breakthrough ceasefire agreement to stop the bloodshed and killing in the Middle East and return the hostages held captive by Hamas back home to their loved ones. And as the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. And in that end, I hope my greatest legacy, when it's all finished, will be known as a peacemaker and a unifier. I hope that's going to be true. You know, when I left, we had no wars, we had no problems, we had no inflation, we had no, all we had was we were going to go just up. And I came back. We have Russia, Ukraine. We have the Middle East has exploded. All of these things would have never happened. And we have inflation that was the worst in the history of our country. But we're joined today by several brave families whose loved ones were taken hostage during the October 7th horrible attack 16 months ago. And I know I speak for everyone here today when I say that we're keeping you in our hearts and our prayers. And please stand if you are one of the people who have been so gravely affected. Please stand. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, they're coming in. More are coming in today. They're coming in. It's a very traumatic situation, very tough, as the people know that are here with us. But they're coming in. And I made a statement, I meant it totally, that if they're not home by the time I get into office, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. And I think they respected that statement, so we'll see. But we have more hostages to come, and we hope they live up to their word. And I have to say, who knows if that's going to happen. But one way or another, it's going to work out. It's going to all work out. As president, I will not rest until every remaining hostage has been returned to their families. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Also with us is an incredible survivor of October 7th. What a horrible day that was. That would have never happened. Iran was broke. They had no money to pay to Hamas or Hezbollah. They were stone cold broke. And when I left, they started selling their oil again. They took the sanctions off. They did everything wrong. I mean, I'd like to say the opposite of that. I would much prefer saying the opposite, but they did everything wrong. That includes with Russia and Ukraine. That should have never happened also. All those millions of kids, you know, the soldiers are just being decimated. The two countries, probably 800,000 Russians, 600, 700,000 Ukrainians, young people, just laying on a battlefield dead. It's a horrible situation going on over there. We're working very hard, and I think making progress to stop it. Also with us is an incredible survivor of October 7th who was held captive by Hamas for more than 8 months. Noah Agramani was the music festival. She was at the music festival and attacked on that terrible day. Where are you? Where are you? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's great that you're here. I watched you on television. I don't know what you're doing, but you look like a much younger person. I don't know what the secret is. Please give it to all of us. For 245 harrowing days, Noah showed unwavering strength and courage and faith as she endured the unendurable, really, what she went through. But by the grace of God, she was rescued by the Israeli Defense Forces, and now she's come back to pray with us this morning, and it's such an honor to have you, and you're really an inspiration, Noah, to all of us. Thank you very much. The innocent civilians attacked on October 7th were targeted for one reason, because they were Jews. They were murdered and kidnapped because of their faith, and these events remind us of how blessed we are to live in a nation that has thrived for 2.5 centuries as a haven of religious freedom, although I will tell you the last 4 years have been very difficult. It would have been a very difficult thing for me to have made that statement if this speech was taking place 2 years ago. My administration is absolutely committed to defending this proud heritage, and I will always protect religious liberty. And that is why today I'm on, and really honoring a lot of people, but I'm announcing that I will be creating a brand new presidential commission on religious liberty. It's going to be a very big deal, which will work tirelessly to uphold this most fundamental right. Unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen this sacred liberty threatened like never before in American history. There's nothing happened like the last 4 years. What's happened with so many things have gone bad, but religion, what they've done, and the persecution that they've executed have been just horrible. For example, most of us would not have believed it possible that a grandmother with a severe medical condition, quite elderly woman, would be put in jail for praying here in America. She was put in jail because she was praying. But we're joined today by a woman who was 75 years old. Paulette Harlow was sentenced to 2 years in prison for peacefully praying outside of a clinic, charged under an obscure law that hadn't been used in years, selectively weaponized against Christians by the previous administration. I never understood how we won with evangelicals, we won with Christians by a lot. But even that little bit that they got, I said, who are the people that voted for them? Who would vote for them? They were terrible. They were terrible to you, and they were terrible to people of religion, all religions. At her sentencing, the judge mocked Paulette's Christian faith. Exactly 2 weeks ago, it was my honor to grant Paulette and other persecuted Christians, about 23 of them, a full and unconditional pardon. We got them out of there. We got them out. They're so clean now. You know those pardons? You're so clean. There's nobody so clean as Paulette in this whole room. She was just, oh, she got a little lucky, didn't she? Yeah, she got lucky that I won that election. But she was going to be in there for a long time, right, Paulette? But what happened to you must never, ever happen again in America. So I want to thank you very much for being here, Paulette. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoy your life. To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. About time, right? Anti-Christian bias. Yeah, you never heard of that one before, right? But it's about time, isn't it, though, really? So many times you hear, but you don't hear the anti-Christian bias. The mission of this task force will be to immediately halt all forms of anti-Christian targeting and discrimination within the federal government, including at the DOJ, which was absolutely terrible, the IRS, the FBI, terrible, and other agencies. In addition, the task force will work to fully prosecute anti-Christian violence and vandalism in our society and to move heaven and earth to defend the rights of Christians and religious believers nationwide. You've never had that before, but this is a very powerful document I'm signing. You got it now. First time you've had it. If we don't have religious liberty, then we don't have a free country. We probably don't even have a country. This week, I'm also creating the White House Faith Office, led by Pastor Paula White, who is so amazing. That man's happy. Look at, stand up. Let me see. Why are you so happy? You love Paula, right? I come from Lebanon. Oh, Lebanon tough. Yeah, so you know what we're talking about better than anybody. Yeah. You're going to have a great new ambassador to Lebanon. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. That's tough. Yeah, you're going to have a great new ambassador. We just put him in. While I'm in the White House, we will protect Christians in our schools, in our military, in our government, in our workplaces, hospitals, and in our public squares. And we will bring our country back together as one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Throughout history, those who have sought control and domination over others have always tried to cut the people off from the connection to their Creator. At the same time, every nation with big dreams and great ambition has recognized that there is no recourse more precious than the faith in the hearts of our people. It's the thing that makes our nation great. It makes other nations great. When you don't have it, you don't see great nations. Without God, we are isolated and alone, but with God, the Scripture tells us all things are possible. Well, look at me. I'm standing before you today. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. A lot of people said, I shouldn't have been here. A beautiful day in Pennsylvania. It's a shot that missed. Well, it got me a little bit. It got me a little bit, but pretty amazing. My son, who's a great shooter, Don, both of them, Eric, they said it's like sinking a 1-foot putt from where that shooter was with that particular weapon. And it just happened to turn at the right instant, a fraction of a second. If I was late or early, it would have been over. And you would have somebody else speaking today. But got very lucky. It was a chart on immigration came down, and I looked to my right. Quickly, I looked to my right. I said, drop that chart. Boom. And I said, man, what was that? So if I didn't make that turn, so it's, you know, my son, Don, said, Dad, I'll tell you, you got saved by God. This is, you know, I shouldn't say this, but that was a big statement for him to make. He was moved, Eric, likewise, because it's, you know, you could say it's a miracle, or you could say something, but it was really, it was God that saved me. Thank you. But even in the dark, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Even in the darkest moments, hope is never lost. And 2 weeks ago, I went to a small town in North Carolina. What a great place North Carolina is. We love North Carolina. We won that thing 3 times. We won the primaries. We won the elections. We won it. And my daughter-in-law, Laura, is so incredible. She comes from North Carolina. She did such a great job. They love her in the state. But we've had great luck there, and I reciprocate. And it had been virtually destroyed, the whole state, this Hurricane Helene. It was a heavy water hurricane, the water like nobody's ever seen. And lakes were built in areas that were always dry. And the people had lost everything they owned. There were numerous people, many people dead. FEMA under Biden was a disaster. They were almost not even, they essentially weren't even there. They'd been abandoned by their government. And seen their friends and neighbors swept away and die. Saw many of them. One of those I met was a pastor named Ramona Nix, really good woman. Her congregation is small, but they had just purchased a brand new church, beautiful church. She said people asked her, "What are you going to do with this big building?" It was such a good, beautiful situation to be in. And then came the hurricane. And she looked at them, she said, "Only God knows." Just 1 week after dedicating that church, the storm hit their little town, and the pastor's church became a lifeboat for a community that was just displaced. The church withstood the storm, one of the few buildings that did. Before the end of the week, the sanctuary was so packed with supplies that it was hard to walk. Everybody from all over the country was sending her. The message was not one of sorrow, but of joy. God is good. And she said it very strong. And she said, "Sir, God is good. He is very good." It's been just 17 days since I took the oath of office. Wow, 17 days. It's time still flies. It's 17 days. It's gone. I've been so busy that it's hard to believe. But we've done a lot in 17 days, haven't we? And in those 17 days, we've accomplished really what some people haven't accomplished in 8 years, from the flood-ravaged valleys of North Carolina to the flame-scorched bluffs of California. I went there. What a shame that is. I've never seen anything like it. As far as the eye could see, just devastation of rich neighborhoods, very rich neighborhoods. Some of the richest people in the country lost their houses. Rich and middle income. I wouldn't say poor people. This was a rough period of weeks. You know, I opened the floodgates a few days ago, let the water come down because the environmentalists didn't want water. They still don't want it. If they had their choice, they don't want it. I said, "Are you crazy?" And I opened, I'm sure you've seen it, the water comes down from the northwest, parts of Canada, I guess, but the Pacific Northwest, and it comes down by millions and millions of barrels a day. And I opened it up. It wasn't that easy to do, but I opened it up and it's pouring down, and it's a beautiful thing. And it should have happened. I told them to do it in my last term. They didn't do it, but now we just did it. They didn't want to do it, but we did it. But from the gang-ridden streets of our inner cities to the war-torn lands of the Middle East, we're working urgently to restore hope and prosperity, safety and peace all over. Every single day of this administration will act with purpose and historic speed, because like that pastor in North Carolina, we know that God is good, our future is bright, and America's glorious destiny is just within our reach. And so together we will make America stronger and prouder, safer, freer, greater, and more faithful to our God than ever before. And I just want to thank you. You're very, very special people. You're great people. It's an honor to be with you. And I will see you again next year. Okay? Thank you very much. God bless you all. And God bless America. God bless you.
President Trump signs an executive order barring men from competing in women's sports, and Pam Bondi is sworn in as U.S. Attorney General with remarks from the president. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
One of President Trump's latest executive orders will provide, quote, equal opportunity for women and girls and keep, quote, men out of women's sports.
Last year, a male cyclist posing as a woman competed in the 800-mile Arizona trail race, a very big deal in cycling, and obliterated the women's course record by nearly 5.5 hours.
A White House document says the executive order upholds the promise of Title IX and ends the dangers and unfair participation of men in women's sports.
We're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding.
While signing, Trump was joined by over 20 women and their daughters from parental rights advocacy group Moms for Liberty. Women's sports advocates Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon were there also. Other related actions Trump has taken since entering office include an executive order proclaiming that the U.S. government will recognize only two sexes, male and female, as well as an order to cut federal funding or support for gender transition surgeries for people under 19 years old. Title IX, passed in 1972, prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or other education program that receives federal funding. And the U.S. officially has a new Attorney General. Pam Bondi was sworn in on Capitol Hill with Trump in attendance. The Senate confirmed Bondi on Tuesday, 54-46, with Democrat Senator John Fetterman joining Republicans in the vote. Bondi says she will make the country proud.
And I will restore integrity to the Justice Department, and I will fight violent crime throughout this country and throughout this world and make America safe again.
Trump says that he's confident Bondi will fulfill her duties.
But she's going to be fair, and she'll lead the Department of Justice in crushing violent crime, demolishing the gangs, which are all over the place.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And joining us now for a discussion on Trump's executive order banning men from women's sports is Alex Newman, award-winning international journalist and president of Liberty Sentinel Media. So, Alex, as you heard just now, Trump's executive order targets schools receiving federal funding, and they'll lose access to that source of money if they violate Title IX. What about schools that choose to forgo federal funding? Would they still be able to continue allowing men in women's sports?
Thank you for having me. And yes, absolutely. The federal funding is really the leverage point that the federal government has on these types of issues. And unfortunately, this is also the tool that multiple Democratic administrations have used to foist a lot of these ideas on public schools and other institutions in conservative-leaning states. So any school that's not taking federal funding, which unfortunately is not a lot of public schools, almost every public school in this country in almost every state is taking federal money in some way, is going to be subject to this. But any school that is not attached to federal funding would be able to continue doing whatever it wanted to. And I'm sure some will.
And how effective do you think this will play out, in terms of achieving its goals?
Well, I think for the next 4 years, this is a slam dunk. There will be very few schools, I think, that continue to allow this, understanding that they're going to risk probably somewhere close to 10% of their budget if they do that. I suspect there will be some that try. I suspect there will be a lot of lawsuits that tie this up for a while. But I think while Trump is in the White House, it's a pretty safe bet that this is going to be effective. But a lot of people are forgetting that in 4 years, we're going to have another election. And at that point, we don't know who will be the next president. And if these tools remain in place, these same tools could very well be used to do exactly what Joe Biden did during his administration, which is to flip this upside down and reimpose the gender ideology on public schools across the country. So I think one of the things that Donald Trump has talked about, shutting down the U.S. Department of Education, would actually be a more effective way of protecting public schools over the long term from this kind of stuff, but he's going to need backing from Congress.
So the NCAA and other sports organizations have allowed transgender athletes to compete in women's divisions. How do you see this executive order affecting their policies?
Well, I think the executive order, obviously the president cannot control those institutions, but I think it's a symptom of a public backlash against this kind of ideology. And I think sports organizations like the ones you mentioned are going to have to come to their senses and adapt to this new reality. There really never was public support for this. If you look at the polling data, even Democrats were very, very much opposed to having men in girls' locker rooms, to having men competing against girls in sports. And so I think the zeitgeist, the public response to this kind of stuff is really going to be the key driver. And I think Trump's executive order is really a symptom of that public sentiment more than the other way around. So I think a lot of sports agencies might try to resist this for a little while, but I think over the long term, at least during Trump's administration, they're going to have to surrender on this and wait and see what happens going forward.
Well, bring it back to the U.S., but I want your thoughts on if there's going to be any impact from other countries with this executive order.
Well, I think most of the world never really jumped on this gender bandwagon. There are a few of the Scandinavian countries, a few of the Northern and Western European countries kind of tried out some of this gender stuff, including, by the way, chopping off body parts from children. And a lot of them have now walked that back. So the United States really was an outlier on this. This was really a Biden administration program, a program that was really very highly ideological. And I think most countries have resisted this trend. You've seen this across Africa, across Latin America, across Asia. You're not seeing a lot of this. Europe was the one region of the world that kind of went along with this, but even they have now really pulled back from the brink. So again, I think Trump is on very solid footing here with public opinion, with the Constitution, as far as international perception is concerned. There is the ideological fringe in the United States, and of course the people profiting from this who are going to resist it. But I think internationally speaking, Trump's executive order really is following international public opinion.
Do you foresee perhaps certain states, more progressive ones, to push back in federal court?
No question. I have no doubt that states like New York, states like California, states like Illinois and New Jersey are going to try to push back. They're going to sue. I think they're going to lose. Anybody who can read Title IX can see very clearly this was not intended to have men participate in women's sports. In fact, exactly the opposite. It was intended to protect female sports from men. That's why it was passed in 1972. And there's no amount of turning into a pretzel that a federal court could do to try to make this apply to men and women's sports. So I think as far as the federal courts are concerned, especially now, Trump is on very solid ground. But no question about it, some of the more radical Democrat states are going to push back.
So you mentioned earlier that perhaps abolishing the education department may have a longer term effect on this. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
Yeah, the Founding Fathers never envisioned a system where the federal government would be telling the states what to do on education or really virtually anything else. In fact, the powers of Congress are listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. I encourage people to get familiar with that. The people who wrote the Constitution never would have imagined that the federal government would one day be involved in deciding what bathrooms people should go into. So this is really a radical departure from what was intended by the Constitution, which, by the way, remains the supreme law of the land. And these tools have been usurped over a period of multiple generations where the federal government, using the lever of federal funding, has tried to dictate policy to state and local governments. And unfortunately, we have seen a very clear trend line of more and more federal involvement, more and more radical ideas being pushed through these kinds of mechanisms. So I think one of the things that Trump has articulated very clearly now, going back to his first term, is we've got to stop this federal meddling. And especially on the education front, he's been very clear about his desire to end federal involvement in education and end the U.S. Department of Education. Whether he'll be able to get that accomplished remains to be seen. Even Ronald Reagan set out to do that initially. But if he is able to do that, if he's able to shut down federal involvement in education, I think over the long term, that's going to be a much, much more powerful way of keeping this sort of extremism, not just out of schools, but out of other institutions as well.
All right, Alex, as always, it's very, very enjoyable to talk to you. That's our time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
The Pentagon announces that the first high-threat immigrants have arrived at Guantanamo Bay. That's as ICE reports it's arrested 100 members of a Venezuelan gang in Colorado. NTD's Arian Pastor has the immigration update.
Okay.
The Pentagon announces that the first illegal immigrants have officially arrived at Guantanamo Bay. A statement reads that these 10 high-threat individuals are currently being housed in vacant detention facilities. That's to ensure the safe and secure detention of these individuals until they can be transported to their country of origin or other appropriate destinations. Photographs showed the immigrants in handcuffs as they were being prepared to board the plane to Cuba on Tuesday. Mexico's foreign minister commented on the U.S. sending some immigrants to Gitmo.
I can say that no Mexican will go there under any circumstances. We sent a diplomatic letter to the U.S. Embassy saying that we will receive every Mexican who wants to come.
This comes just a few days after Mexico agreed to improve border security. President Trump had previously warned he'd impose heavy tariffs if Mexico didn't help secure the border. The White House gave more details on Wednesday.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to permanently supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the U.S. border. who will be specifically designated to stopping fentanyl and criminal aliens from pouring into our country.
Footage shows hundreds of Mexican soldiers being mobilized. They'll be posted to hotspots with high rates of illegal immigration and drug and weapons trafficking. Meanwhile, in Georgia,
I'm going to ask you again because you didn't give me a very definitive answer last time. Are you taking any medication?
You check it out.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, conducted a targeted operation early Wednesday. They apprehended an alleged immigrant from Mexico with a criminal history. Officers say they found a weapon in his car and ammunition in his pocket.
We had a lot of officers out in the field today. They quickly surrounded the vehicle, jumped out, and were able to grab the subject pretty quickly. And that's when they found the firearms. So everything went smooth, but it could have gone really bad.
Also on Wednesday, ICE published this picture saying over 100 members of the violent Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua were targeted for arrest and detention in Colorado. Officials say the investigations are still ongoing. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And mayors of some of the country's largest sanctuary cities will testify before Congress next month. So-called sanctuary cities often have policies that aren't in line with federal immigration laws. The Democratic mayors of New York City, Chicago, Boston, and Denver have all agreed to be there. Republican House Committee Chairman James Comer says the committee plans to press the mayors for answers for what he says are policies putting public safety at risk. New York Mayor Eric Adams has said he would uphold existing sanctuary city laws despite saying he's open to working with the Trump administration on illegal immigration. Next, the U.S. government sued Illinois and the city of Chicago today. The lawsuit alleged they blocked the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. Citing a national emergency declared by the president on Inauguration Day, the DOJ is seeking to block the enforcement of several state and local laws. The department said the laws, quote, interfere with and discriminate against the federal government's enforcement of federal immigration law. The complaint was filed in Chicago federal court. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he won't attend a scheduled G20 summit. He says it's because of South Africa's position on several issues. A G20 meeting of foreign ministers is set to take place in Johannesburg later in February. In a post on X, Rubio said South Africa is taking away land from local landowners and promoting an agenda that he equates with DEI and climate change. President Trump earlier threatened to cut off funding to South Africa related to the country's land seizure laws. Trump said in an X post that the laws were aimed at certain classes of people. South Africa's president responded to Trump saying the country has always had laws that balance the need for public use of land and the protection of property owners' rights. More European luxury brands are considering making their items here in the U.S. A trade deficit with Europe has President Trump contemplating more tariffs. On Tuesday, the European Union said they want to engage swiftly with the U.S. to avoid that possibility. Luxury label LVMH has already hinted at manufacturing in the United States. NTD Sean Marshall has more on the prospect of European luxury brands made in the USA.
LVMH CEO Bernard Arnault has sparked a debate over France's attractiveness for business. In post-earnings remarks late on Tuesday, the billionaire said his company, known for its high-end products made in France and Italy, has been seriously considering bulking up its production capacities in the United States. Retail strategist and CEO of Retail Boss, Janelle Alvarado, shared with me her thoughts about luxury American-made items possibly becoming more of a trend.
So we're going to continue to see this, and is it something that luxury brands should or should not do? I think it's always been something that has been maybe not in the forefront as a lot of their products are made and known for being produced internationally in Italy and Paris, right? Known for their high craftsmanship. The perceptions have been changing where Americans do see that brands could be a premium product made in U.S. It doesn't have to just be an overseas made product to have quality.
The LVMH CEO cited a wind of optimism in the U.S. that contrasted with a cold shower of potentially higher corporate taxes in France. But any move to production on the other side of the Atlantic would likely be limited in scope, said LVMH investors. But how might Americans feel about luxury brands traditionally produced in Italy and France being made in America?
Customers are a little bit changing in their mindset of what luxury really means. And I feel like the U.S., especially made in America products, is starting to catch on as something that can be a place where premium product is made. And also that customer has more peace of mind that it's being crafted in a more sustainable as well as fair way.
LVMH already has 2 sites in California, opened in 1990 and 2011, and a factory in Texas opened in 2019. It also acquired jewelry workshops with the company's $16 billion purchase of American label Tiffany & Company in 2021. The LVMH CFO told reporters on Tuesday American clients accept made in the U.S., so we can consider the United States. European Union Trade Chief Maros Shefčovič also said on Tuesday, quote, "We are ready to engage immediately, and we hope that through this early engagement, we can avoid the measures which would bring a lot of disturbance to the most important trade and investment relationship on this planet." Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Here are today's top stories. Prime Minister Netanyahu is on Capitol Hill this afternoon meeting with congressional Republican leaders. What he says about the possibility of U.S. troops setting foot in the Gaza Strip. President Trump calls on Americans to bring religion back to their lives. More on his remarks from the bipartisan National Prayer Breakfast. As part of Trump's campaign promise, federal employees have until today to make a big decision about their careers. Secretary of State Marco Rubio concludes his trip to Central America today in the Dominican Republic. What he's managed to do so far on his 5-country visit. Super Bowl ads aren't cheap, but they can give brands a lot of exposure. Fans gear up for this year's commercials.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, February 6th. I'm Don Ma. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be on Capitol Hill today to meet with Republican leaders. The meeting comes after lawmakers were surprised by President Trump's proposal to take over and rebuild the Gaza Strip. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us now to discuss. Melina, good afternoon. First, tell us what you know about the meeting today.
Hi, good afternoon, Don. So Prime Minister Netanyahu is here on Capitol Hill for those series of meetings. First, he met with Senate Leader John Thune on the Senate side earlier this morning at around 10 a.m. And then next, he'll meet with House Speaker Mike Johnson at around noontime if he's not in that meeting already. And right now, the details around what they're going to be discussing, what's on the agenda, is scarce. We expect to know more later on. House Speaker Mike Johnson is supposed to give brief remarks following their closed-door meeting. But we can assume some of the top items on the agenda will be that $1 billion arms sale agreement that Trump had prepared for Israel, but Congress now has on hold, as well as the ceasefire deal with Hamas. Of course, lawmakers are going to be curious on what are the details, what's going on the ground there, and how Netanyahu plans to move forward from that ceasefire deal, what the next steps are in that regard. And then, of course, we know in the last 24 hours there was a big shakeup here with Trump's new proposal catching lawmakers off guard about that idea to have U.S. to control the Gaza Strip and rebuild that area. Don?
And Melina, that proposal from Trump yesterday did come as a surprise to many, and lawmakers have had rather strong reactions. Can you tell us more about where they stand on the possibility of U.S. control and military presence in the Gaza Strip?
So, Don, there are some updates as far as the military presence, the idea of having U.S. troops on the ground in Gaza. So right when Benjamin Netanyahu was going into that meeting with Senate Leader John Thune, a reporter screamed out a question asking if those troops would be needed on the ground to fulfill Trump's vision for what he wants to see done in Gaza, and Netanyahu responded with a definite no. So that puts an end to that discussion right there. People might still probe about it, but that's what Netanyahu has said at this point in time. As for how lawmakers are reacting to the entire idea of U.S. control over the Gaza Strip and this rebuilding idea that Trump has, well, there are varied responses. Even among Republicans, we see a slight difference between Senate Leader John Thune and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Senate Leader Thune described it as just one idea, so not throwing his full support behind it just yet, whereas you see House Speaker Mike Johnson was more so welcoming it with open arms, indicating that he's willing to get his whole conference on board. Listen to what Johnson had to say about this.
It's a bold move, certainly, far bolder than what's been done before, but I think we've got to stand unequivocally in an unwavering manner, as the whip said, with Israel, our closest ally and friend in the Middle East. And I think if we could bring control of that situation and bring about a lasting peace there, it would do well for everybody, not just in the region, but around the world.
Now, other Republican senators want more answers. So you have, for example, senators like Josh Hawley, who are concerned about the fiscal aspect of it. Will taxpayer dollars be needed to rebuilding the area in Gaza? That's a question on the table here. And then as for Democrats' response, well, overall, they are opposed to it. You have the Democrat House Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying that he wants to stick to the longstanding foreign policy approach here with this two-state solution. But then you have others who are taking a more stern approach, like the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks. He said it's a nonsense idea because from his perspective, he doesn't think the respective nations that are involved in this will even be open to such a proposal. Listen to Meeks.
Billions or trillions of dollars that would be there. You're talking about going against all international norms where there's no one in the world, whether it be those immediately there, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, or even our European allies, or anyone that would agree to anything of this nature. It just makes no sense.
And then you have other Democrats who are taking an even more stern opposition to this. You have Representative Al Green from Texas, who even said that he wanted to introduce articles of impeachment against Trump because of this. And it's yet to be seen whether or not that will get in the steam of the entire Democrat conference. Don, back to you.
All right, Melina, thank you for that, as always. Next, President Trump gives more details about a possible plan for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip. He says no U.S. troops would be needed for the idea to work. Trump says Israel would hand over Gaza to the U.S. once the fighting ends. By then, the Palestinians living there would have already been resettled. According to Trump, they would live in far safer and more beautiful communities in the region with modern homes. The U.S. would then begin rebuilding Gaza. Trump says it would be one of the best developments of its kind. He added that no U.S. soldiers would have to be deployed for that. And Israel is already ordering its army to allow the voluntary departure of Gaza's residents. Israel's defense minister says he welcomes Trump's plan. According to the minister, Gaza residents should be given the freedom to leave and immigrate. Israel's plan includes exit options via land crossings as well as departures by sea and air. Saudi Arabia rejects the proposal. The King of Jordan says he also rejects any attempt to annex land and displace Palestinians. And Israel is withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council. This comes after President Trump signed an executive order also ordering the U.S. to leave the council. Israel says it is doing the same and accuses the agency of institutional bias. Officials allege the council has been biased against Israel since its founding in 2006. President Trump delivered remarks this morning at the annual National Prayer Breakfast at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. The more than 70-year-old Washington tradition brings together a bipartisan group of lawmakers for fellowship. Listen.
At every stage of the American story, our country has drawn hope and courage and inspiration from our trust in the Almighty. Deep in the soul of every patriot is the knowledge that God has a special plan and a glorious mission for America. And that plan is going to happen.
Trump praised key political leaders, emphasized America's deep religious heritage, and called for a national revival of faith. The president reflected on having a bullet come close to killing him at a rally in Pennsylvania last year. He told those in attendance that it changed something in him and strengthened his faith in God. He drew laughs when he expressed gratitude that the episode didn't affect his hair. Trump also addressed national security, military recruitment, and air traffic control safety, advocating for modernization. He urged political unity, stronger borders, and restoring national values to bring Americans together. Here's what the president said he will do on the issue of religious freedom during his second term.
I'm announcing that I will be creating a brand new presidential commission on religious liberty. It's going to be a very big deal, which will work tirelessly to uphold this most fundamental right. Unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen this sacred liberty threatened like never before in American history. To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. About time, right? Anti-Christian bias.
Millions of U.S. government workers have until today to tell the Trump administration whether they will accept a buyout offer or remain on the job. If they remain, they face the possibility of being dismissed from work. It's not clear how many of the federal government's 2.3 million civilian employees will ultimately accept the offer. The buyout promises to pay their salaries until October if they resign on time. President Trump's drive to reduce the size of the government in a matter of weeks is unprecedented and has caused an uproar in Washington. Some are fighting it in court. The buyout is part of a government overhaul led by Elon Musk, has resulted in the removal of personnel in a number of departments and has significantly scaled down America's main humanitarian aid agency. The White House says it's following through on Trump's campaign promise to cut wasteful spending and slim down the federal bureaucracy. Democrats are calling for an investigation into potential national security threats posed by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOJ. They say unauthorized individuals might be accessing classified data. The Trump administration has put USAID staff on leave this week. Musk says he's working to shut down the agency, which he called beyond repair. The lawmakers say that's when unauthorized individuals accessed classified data at USAID. Musk's team allegedly also accessed U.S. payment systems holding personal data for millions of Americans. Democrats from the House Oversight Committee now sent a letter to multiple federal agencies. Those include the Treasury, the Department of Education, the Small Business Administration, and other agencies. The lawmakers want Deputy Inspectors General to investigate the potential national security breaches. Here's the House Progressive Caucus at a press conference earlier today.
Today, we're here to say with one voice, fire Elon Musk. An unelected, unaccountable billionaire now has seemingly unlimited powers over Americans' private data and over Americans' taxpayer dollars.
In the last week alone, Elon Musk has seized control of the U.S. Department of Treasury's payment system, exposing Americans' most personal financial information, has shuttered the U.S. Agency for International Aid, USAID, putting the lives of millions of people at risk across the world.
Meanwhile, Senator Durbin confirmed today Senate Judiciary Democrats will delay the vote on Patel's nomination by a week.
So you're holding over this Patel nomination for a week, is that right?
Yes, that's normal, but we asked for a meeting because several things that he testified about turned out to be problematic.
And we're heading to break now. Coming up, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi ordered the Department of Justice to pause all funds to sanctuary cities. What's the impact? And the Justice Department says in a lawsuit that friendly immigration policies in Chicago and Illinois are interfering with federal law. Stay tuned for that in just a minute.
brushing your teeth. Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one get one free offer goes away.
Welcome back. Mayors of some of the country's largest sanctuary cities will testify before Congress next month. So-called sanctuary cities often have policies that aren't in line with federal immigration laws. The Democratic mayors of New York City, Chicago, Boston, and Denver have all agreed to be there. Republican House Committee Chairman James Comer says the committee plans to press the mayors for answers for what he says are policies putting public safety at risk. New York Mayor Eric Adams has said he would uphold existing sanctuary city laws, despite saying he's open to working with the Trump administration on illegal immigration. And the Trump administration's Justice Department sued Chicago and Illinois today, claiming its welcoming immigration policies impede federal regulations. In their complaint, the department cites specific state and city law they say, quote, are designed to and, in fact, interfere with and discriminate against the federal government's enforcement of federal immigration law, and that these laws violate the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution. Lawsuit comes just days after enhanced immigration enforcement in Chicago and parts of Illinois. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a frequent Trump critic, questioned the aggressive approach of the operations. The lawsuit seeks to have 3 city and state immigration policies deemed invalid. And Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered the Department of Justice to pause all funds to so-called sanctuary cities. The new AG said DOJ grants should not go to jurisdictions that unlawfully interfere with federal law enforcement operations. During his first term, President Donald Trump blocked funding to sanctuary cities through an executive order, but courts ultimately concluded that the action violated the Constitution's separation of powers. The Supreme Court declined to hear appeals. Today, Bondi ordered the Justice Department to investigate incidents involving obstruction of federal immigration operations. The Attorney General instructed prosecutors to bring charges if there were violations of the law. And joining us now to discuss U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's ordering the Department of Justice to pause all funds to sanctuary cities is Andrew Arthur, fellow in Law and Policy, Center for Immigration Studies, and former immigration judge. So, Andrew, first of all, good to have you here. What specific statutes or laws allow the DOJ to pause or revoke funding to sanctuary cities?
So, yeah, the first thing to keep in mind is that Congress has plenary authority as it relates to immigration. In our federal system, the federal Congress is the one that makes the immigration laws, not the states, not localities. There are a series of grants, law enforcement grants, that states and localities receive, justice assistance grants, so-called burn grants, and state criminal alien assistance program grants, all of which are focused on law enforcement. There are a couple of specific provisions in federal law that the Attorney General is going to be looking at. One of them is 8 United States Code Section 1373, which prevents states and localities from impeding the ability of immigration authorities to send information to state and local officers and to receive information from those state and local officers. So they're going to be looking at whether any of that is occurring. And then there's also a provision in Section 274 of the Immigration and Nationality Act that bars any individual from harboring a foreign national, knowing that that foreign national is in the United States illegally. That is another one of those provisions that they're going to be looking at. That's a law that hasn't really been interpreted very well in this context, but I think the Attorney General is going to check it out and see what she finds.
And do you see this case where the DOJ is pausing funding being challenged by sanctuary cities and maybe perhaps even going up to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, when Congress put that Section 1373 provision into the law back in 1996, Rudolph Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York City, challenged it 11 days after it took effect. So the states and the localities want the federal funding. They just don't want to cooperate with federal officials when the subject is immigration. So there will be challenges, and I think they're ultimately going to get resolved by the Supreme Court.
So there's an appeals court in 2020 that sided with the Trump administration on this attempt to block funds from sanctuary cities. Can you tell us more about that and what happened then?
Yeah, so there was an effort starting with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, early on in the Trump administration to limit the availability of funds. But when it comes to that 1373 power that I've discussed, it is, one of those things that various courts have weighed in on, and that various courts have said it's perfectly permissible for Congress to require or to prevent states and localities from barring the exchange of information. So to that degree, it's a pretty solid basis. But when you start to talk about the funding schemes, unless Congress has specifically limited the ability, which they do to a degree with 1373, that's when you get into, questionable legal waters. That's what the Trump administration, Attorney General Bondi is going to need to look at.
All right. And I'm wondering, how much do sanctuary cities actually rely on these funds? What could be the impact?
Yeah, I mean, they're huge because these funds exist to supplement the abilities of states and localities to fund their local police, to fund their courts, to fund public defenders. And the states and localities don't want to lose that money. Their representatives want to make sure they keep getting that money. And so it could be a big bite if the Attorney General attempts to withhold that money and the Department of Justice survives a legal challenge. So when you talk about public safety, the public is safer when criminals are off the streets. And that really is the primary push of the Trump administration at this point. So, there are going to be two courts. There's going to be the federal courts and there's going to be the court of public opinion. And I think that this one's going to get a pretty fair hearing in both of them.
And which way do you think, if the DOJ's pause is being challenged in court, which way do you think the decision will go? Are there any past rulings by Supreme Court perhaps relevant to the subject?
So, yeah, when you talk about funding schemes, the Impoundment Act goes into effect. That was passed in response to some abuses of the Nixon administration to withhold money. But, as recently as 2021, when the Biden administration paused funding for border wall construction, there was an Impoundment Act challenge to that, and the administration survived that Impoundment Act challenge. So the longer that it goes on, the closer it gets to an impoundment, that is the blocking of federal funding going forward. This is a fairly quick review and one that's, fairly well legally supported as it relates to suspending those funds, then I think that the Department of Justice will be in a stronger position which is why right now it's a pause. I think the pause is going to survive. But I think that anything longer than a pause, unless it's based upon legal precedent and strong legal arguments, is probably going to fail. But, it remains to see how this is going to go.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit more about U.S. Code 1373? Under what circumstances is one in violation of that, perhaps by public officials?
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably should have explained that a little bit better earlier. Immigration authorities will often reach out to local cops to find out when a specific individual is going to be released from criminal detention or confinement. And some states and localities attempt to impede that flow of information because, of course, ICE officers want to be there. They would prefer to take custody of those individuals in jails and in prisons because those are secure environments. They don't want to have to go out and arrest criminal aliens on the street because of the danger that poses to officers and to public safety. They would prefer to be there, but if they can't be there, they would in the jails and the prisons. They would prefer to know exactly when those individuals are going to be released. And that's the kind of information that ICE is looking for right now.
All right, Andrew, that's our time today. Thank you very much. Pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also said Washington was reaching out to USAID missions overseas to identify programs that will be exempted from shutting down. Here's more.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the Trump administration is working to identify U.S. aid programs that will be exempted from sweeping stop work orders issued last month. The administration on Monday said it would put on leave all directly hired employees of U.S. aid globally and recall thousands of personnel working overseas, triggering protests like this one outside the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. But the announcement listed some exceptions that included, quote, specially designated programs. Rubio on Wednesday said the basis for issuing exemptions would be whether a program aligns with and furthers American national interests. Speaking in Guatemala City as part of a tour of the Central American region to address security and migration issues, Rubio said programs in Guatemala aimed at combating drug trafficking in collaboration with Guatemalan authorities would qualify.
This is an example of foreign aid that's in our national interest. That's why I've issued a waiver for these programs.
He mentioned that the State Department was issuing similar waivers every single day without detailing what those waivers were.
Now, once a low-profile agency, USAID is now a flashpoint in a fight over presidential power. NTD's Daniel Monahan takes a closer look at the organization that is igniting so much debate.
Founded in 1961 under President John F. Kennedy, USAID employs 10,000 people and manages a $50 billion budget and is widely known as a form of American soft power. Supporters call it vital, critics call it wasteful. Now the Trump administration and Elon Musk's budget-slashing Department of Government Efficiency are moving to dismantle it. USAID offices were shut on February 3rd, most employees placed on leave, and plans announced to merge it into the State Department. Democrats call it an abuse of power and vow to fight. On Monday, the White House cited USAID projects it called wasteful. $1.5 million for workplace diversity in Serbia, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, and $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. Representative Wesley Hunt pointed to more, including $56 million for tourism in Egypt and Tunisia, and $27 million for deportee reintegration gift bags, likening USAID spending to a reckless child with a credit card. A February 1st study by the Middle East Forum think tank found USAID gave $122 million to groups linked to terrorist organizations, including Hamas. A July 2024 Inspector General report flagged oversight failures. Senator Joni Ernst accused USAID of obstructing scrutiny, citing mismanagement and refusals to disclose costs. She also said the agency sent nearly $1 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which the CIA believes was the most likely source of COVID-19. The Trump administration announced on Tuesday that nearly all USAID workers will be pulled from the field. The order takes effect Friday at midnight, giving staff 30 days to return unless deemed essential. Non-essential contractors will be fired. Dr. Atul Gawande, former USAID Assistant Administrator for Global Health, warned the cuts will harm global health efforts.
These are programs that range from eradicating polio to fighting outbreaks that are occurring right now. Bird flu monitoring is being shut down.
Doctors of the World Turkey say USAID's stop work order forced them to close 12 field hospitals and lay off over 300 staff in northern Syria.
Close all the clinics, stop all your doctors and all your healthcare professionals, and you are not providing any more services to women, children, elderly.
The organization provides medical aid to northern Syria, including Aleppo, as well as Gaza. Democrat lawmakers gathered outside the Capitol on Wednesday to protest the shutdown of USAID.
We will fight their violation of civil rights laws. We will fight their violations of separation of powers.
Make no mistake about it. Elon Musk's effort to dismantle the Agency for International Development is a gift to China. It's a gift to Russia.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday the Trump administration was reaching out to USAID missions overseas to select programs that will be exempted from the sweeping stop work orders. The criteria for exemptions will be whether or not a program furthers U.S. national interests and is aligned with them.
What would be a gift to our geopolitical rivals is billions of dollars in foreign aid that is not aligned to the national interest and the foreign policy of the United States.
Rubio says USAID has provided very little cooperation.
In fact, we had individuals, even after the orders were issued, that were still trying to push payments through in contravention and in direct insubordination.
While shutting down USAID could save tax dollars, critics warn of vital foreign aid being caught in the crossfire. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Meanwhile, about 200 workers at the Environmental Protection Agency are expecting to be put on paid leave. EPA leaders told workers at the agency's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights they'll be treated as a DEI division. They said they plan to implement the Trump administration's policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. An executive order calls for the termination of such programs and its employees. The EPA already shuttered its DEI office and put its employees on paid leave. Trump administration officials have said environmental justice programs are DEI initiatives. But many EPA workers disagree. Those programs are meant to ensure federal policies protect underserved communities from things like pollution and climate change. Several major U.S. companies are scaling back their DEI programs in response to increasing pressure. Google has rescinded its diversity goals for leadership, while Target is ending its DEI initiatives. Those include support for Black employees and promoting Black-owned businesses. Meta is discontinuing its DEI team, focusing instead on fair practices for all. Meanwhile, Amazon has also paused some DEI programs. McDonald's, Walmart, and Ford have made similar moves as well. They cite factors like the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action. Critics argue that such programs often discriminate, while supporters say they aim to correct systemic inequalities. West Point has shut down about a dozen cadet clubs centered around race, gender, and sexuality. It comes as the Trump administration pushes to eliminate DEI programs across the federal government. A memo from Chad Foster, deputy commander at the U.S. Military Academy, instructed those clubs to immediately stop operations and remove all public-facing content. Recent Defense Department guidance says efforts to divide the force erode camaraderie. All other cadet clubs have been ordered to pause operations pending a review. And winter storms are set to blast through the east half of the U.S. at a frenzied pace that could last a couple of weeks. The jet stream is locked in a nearly perfect line from west to east and will funnel storms across the northern part of the lower 48. And that will mean new storms every few days until the jet stream shifts, which might not happen until the second half of February. The first storm started forming yesterday afternoon over the central Mississippi Valley and brought slick conditions to parts of the region. From there, it will spread wintry precipitation over more than 1,000 miles of the eastern U.S. from Missouri to Maine. A mix of sleet, freezing rain, snow, and rain is forecast across the Midwest and into parts of the Northeast today. The main threat will be hazardous ice, capable of knocking out power and making roads dangerously slick. Coming up after the break, Chinese e-commerce platforms could soon be hit by actions from the European Union. Officials there have proposed a new rule to curb the flow of cheap products entering the EU. And British businesses preparing for potential tariff hits. They plan to adapt supply chains, some seeking to diversify, others to expand product offerings. Malcolm Hudson reports from London after this.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
There's always a searching process for beauty. You know it when you see it.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
I was a quarterback at Hardaway High School. College first-round draft pick, on and off the field. We were taught to not show any signs of weakness. During the football season, I would stop eating. But I didn't know I was depressed. I thought that something was wrong with me. For 20 plus years was physical. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father, as a man, and as a husband. Put the importance on your mental health. I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. The first tool is therapy. The second one is positive self-talk. And then journaling, putting your thoughts on paper. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
Welcome back. An incident at Seattle Tacoma Airport. Authorities say a wing of a Japan Airlines jet struck the tail of a parked Delta Airplanes plane yesterday. The Federal Aviation Authority paused some flights to the airport following the collision and said it will investigate what happened. It occurred on a taxi lane while the Delta Boeing 737 was waiting to have ice removed from its exterior. There were 142 passengers on board the Delta plane. Delta said there were no reports of injuries. Japan Airlines did not immediately respond to an emailed request for comment. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will be traveling to Washington today. He plans to have his first in-person meeting with President Donald Trump this week. Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that Ishiba intends to build a relationship of trust and cooperation with the Trump administration and elevate the Japan-U.S. alliance to new heights. And China filed a World Trade Organization complaint against Trump's new 10% tariff on Chinese imports. Here are the details.
In the Wednesday filing, China argues that the tariff, as well as Trump's cancellation of a duty-free exemption for low-value packages, are protectionist and break WTO rules. Beijing's complaint also comes after Trump's move to shut a trade loophole that allowed small-value packages to be shipped duty-free. The so-called de minimis provision, used widely by e-commerce giants like Shein and Temu, exempted packages with goods worth less than $800 from duties. Around 1.36 billion shipments entered the United States using the de minimis provision in 2024. The Trump administration has blamed the de minimis exemption for allowing fentanyl and its precursor chemicals to enter the U.S. unscreened. Recent Reuters reporting has also found that drug traffickers are exploiting the exemption. Beijing's Wednesday WTO filing could lead to a ruling that Trump's duties violated trade rules, in the same manner that a 2020 ruling found that his first-term China tariffs broke trade regulations. However, such a victory would be unlikely to satisfy Beijing because the WTO's appeals body has been largely inoperable for years. That's because of Washington's blocking of appointments of appellate judges over what it views as judicial overreach by the body, which has prohibited a final decision in the 2020 case.
Now, it's worth mentioning China itself has received a lot of criticism over market violations. In a report last year, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives called China the biggest challenge to the international trading system established by the WTO. It criticized Beijing for embracing a state-directed, non-market approach to the economy and trade, which runs counter to WTO principles. The report also said China targets industries for global market domination by its companies. It said China's non-market policies and practices cause serious harm to workers, businesses, and industries in the U.S. and worldwide. Next, Chinese e-commerce platforms like Temu, Shein, and AliExpress might soon face obstacles in running their businesses in Europe. The European Union has proposed new measures to curb the flow of cheap Chinese products flooding its markets. The move follows a similar action taken by the U.S. The European Commission released a statement yesterday calling on EU lawmaking bodies to accelerate a proposed customs reforms. Here's what's at stake. Packages worth less than about $156 can currently enter the Union duty-free, and Chinese e-commerce platforms benefit the most from this policy. 90% of these shipments in 2024 came from China. Lawmakers have voiced concern that these dirt-cheap Chinese products could expose consumers to harmful chemicals, as well as undermine local businesses. A proposal calling for cancellation of the duty-free rule has been on the table for 2 years. Now, officials are urging the EU Parliament to expedite the voting process. Earlier this week, President Trump also signed an executive order to revoke a rule allowing cheap Chinese goods to enter the U.S. duty-free. British businesses are preparing for potential tariff hits, with firms planning to adapt supply chains. Some seek to diversify their chain, others to expand their product offerings. This comes as the Bank of England lowers interest rates and predicts a poorer economic outlook. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Housen has the story from London.
A survey of 1,500 British businesses found nearly 40% of firms are increasing their prices in response to the potential threat of American tariffs. Many firms are also planning to adapt their supply chains to weather the storm. The poll was conducted by banking giant HSBC in November as part of the bank's Going Global for Growth report. 41% of firms surveyed plan to diversify their supply chains. 31% are looking to bring their supply chain back in-house, while 41% said they would expand the products and services they sell to help offset any tariff hit. It comes as President Trump threatens tariffs against Canada, Mexico, China, and the European Union. With Britain, Trump suggested last Sunday a trade deal can be struck.
UK is out of line, but I think that one can be worked out.
A number of firms and manufacturers are bracing for a financial hit. Scotch whisky and Guinness maker Diageo cautioned earlier this week that Trump's proposed tariffs could deal a $200 million blow to their profits. The London-listed spirits giant also scrapped a key sales target because of growing uncertainty linked to the tariffs and volatile consumer demand. While firms are hiking prices and taking action ahead of tariff impacts, the HSBC survey showed only 15% said they would reduce their overseas trading activity. On Thursday, the Bank of England slashed short-term growth forecasts for the British economy. The central bank also cut interest rates by a quarter percentage point to 4.5%. This leaves British rates among the highest for advanced economies, and just above the US Federal Reserve's range of 4.25% to 4.5%. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said he expected to be able to cut interest rates further, but stressed that progress would be cautious.
We live in an uncertain world, and the road ahead will have bumps on it.
He cited both domestic and global uncertainty, incoming tax increases for employers in the UK, and Trump's tariffs. On tariffs, he said,
"We're just not in a position to judge these effects at the moment because we don't know what the policies are. I mean, they do change from day to day."
British Chancellor Rachel Reeves said she is still not satisfied with the UK's growth rate, and that the government will go faster to kickstart economic growth. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
A French heritage association is suing to stop Notre Dame's new contemporary stained glass. The contemporary stained glass is backed by President Macron, but it faces opposition from associations and even the Ministry of Culture. Critics argue it disrupts the cathedral's heritage and its beautiful aesthetics. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez reports from Paris.
1,300 craftsmen, including painters, architects, woodworkers, tile makers, had to follow strict guidelines to restore Notre Dame's beauty and preserve its authenticity. Some said their best work is when people cannot tell the difference between the restored parts of the building and the original ones.
However, one change has been introduced to the cathedral: contemporary paintings facing the original ones. Soon, all 6 stained glass windows on the east side of the cathedral will be replaced with contemporary ones. The decision to replace the windows was made by President Emmanuel Macron and approved by the Archbishop of Notre Dame. Several associations, government-funded agencies, and the Ministry of Culture have opposed the project. The president of a heritage preservation association, Julien Lacaze, is taking legal action.
Our legal action is provided for in French law. The first thing we criticize is the public institution in charge of Notre Dame Cathedral, which is overstepping its remit. A law that has been passed to protect the restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral and the original stained glass windows are protected as historic artifacts. Notre Dame administration doesn't respect the rules.
The cathedral has undergone many changes throughout its 1,000-year history, often driven by kings or the French administration. One man in particular is credited for the 19th century modifications, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. He worked on the cathedral's modern architecture, including the spire, the statues of kings at the forefront, and the stained glass windows.
The stained glass windows from the Middle Ages were destroyed in the 18th century to let more light into the cathedral. And in the 19th century, based on the drawings he'd made, Viollet-le-Duc reconstructed the stained glass windows according to Middle Ages designs and ideas, as they were imagined at that time.
Lacaze argues that Viollet-le-Duc's work on the cathedral should be preserved.
When you enter the cathedral, you don't immediately notice the most impressive stained glass windows. You walk past beautifully crafted, colorful stained glass, leading up to the breathtaking rose windows on the right and left. This progression enhances the experience. Installing contemporary stained glass on one side would disrupt this beautiful design.
According to the specialized media outlet La Tribune de l'Art, the decision on the new windows is still pending. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up after the break, Super Bowl ads aren't cheap, but they can give brands a lot of exposure. Fans gear up for this year's commercials. And dog lovers prepare for canine cuteness. Puppies are set to play at Sunday's annual Puppy Bowl. Stay tuned for that.
Right now at Mathis Home, buy one Lazy Boy recliner, get the second one free. That's right, buy one recliner, get the matching recliner absolutely free. Recliner pairs start at just $7.99. It's your chance to save on the handcrafted quality and comfort that Lazy Boy is famous for. And get 2 great chairs for one low price. They're all in stock now with easy financing and fast free delivery. Buy one, get one free on Lazy Boy recliners, only at Mathis Home.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. Food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month. And we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
Kids love it. Parents trust it.
Obviously.
Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjion Campus courses led by expert educators.
This is spectacular.
Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more.
Wow.
All while having fun.
Perfect.
Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Welcome back. Major brands are hoping to score points with their Super Bowl commercials this Sunday. The ad spots aren't cheap, but they can be winners for companies looking to reach a more than 100 million viewers. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
The Kansas City Chiefs look to defend their Super Bowl title against the Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday in New Orleans. For advertisers, a successful 30-second commercial during the game is the real championship.
It has been a banner year for the National Football League. Or should I call it the National Football League?
From the very beginning, football has been a conspiracy to make us hungry.
So how famous are you? Like Matt Damon famous?
Maybe Ben Affleck famous.
That's a shame.
Adweek Chief Content Officer Zoe Ruderman said celebrities still reign supreme.
We're seeing a big return of the combination of celebrities and humor. This is probably no surprise to anyone, but it's interesting that a lot of brands have doubled down in this. So not just one celebrity or two celebrities, but basically ensemble casts.
While $8 million for a 30-second ad isn't cheap, Ruderman says the exposure is worth it.
Listen, $8 million is a lot of money for a corporation, but there is no better moment to get your brand messaging or awareness out there. This is one of the few moments left where people tune in. It's appointment television viewing. The audience is huge and it's growing.
The spots on Fox, which will broadcast the game, sold out in November, but Ruderman explains how the investment is bigger than the 30-second spot itself.
What's really special about Super Bowl ads is it doesn't just end with the 30 seconds or the 60 seconds on television. People are talking about them. There's a lot of lead up, there are teasers, many of the ads are released weeks in advance, so you get a lot of this sort of organic chatter.
You're saying the pan I used to fry my bacon is made out of flying saucers?
We don't have time for a science lesson, Mr. Ramsey.
More than 120 million viewers are expected to watch the Super Bowl this Sunday. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And hundreds of football fanatics descended on the NFL Super Bowl Experience fan zone at the Convention Center in New Orleans yesterday. Fans donned their favorite team's jerseys, walked the floor, and participated in NFL skills drills.
Oh, it's great, man. Get to have this type of experience, you know. Take the family out, let them have fun. It's always great to have a Super Bowl. You get the best of the best come play in your hometown, you know. It's a great experience.
Because if they win, it's going to be 3 times in a row, and also I like them.
and I just really, because they have Mahomes.
I'll be pulling for the Eagles because of the NFC. My little boy wants Chiefs to win because he loves Mahomes, but I'll stick with the NFC.
It's been awesome the whole time. Yesterday, me and my son got to go hang out in the French Quarter for a while, do some tours, eat a ton of great food, and then we've been here today. So it's been amazing.
The Kansas City Chiefs are making their 5th Super Bowl appearance in 6 years. They aim to capture an unprecedented 3rd consecutive championship. They'll face the Philadelphia Eagles for the 2nd time during their current run. Tourism officials expect around 200,000 visitors to come into the city for the week-long celebration leading up to the game. The events will include a Mardi Gras-style Super Bowl parade through the French Quarter on Saturday morning that will feature the famed Budweiser Clydesdales. And move over experts, the winner of the Super Bowl has already been chosen, not by sports analysts, but by a pride of lions rescued from Ukraine. These football gurus made their choice in an unorthodox way by knocking over a toy goalpost. And the obvious interpretation here is that the Chiefs will crush the Eagles this Sunday. The 4 lions arrived at the Wildcat Sanctuary in Sandstone, Minnesota 3 years ago. They were found as cubs in a duffel bag at a train station in Ukraine. According to the sanctuary, they've taken to their new country with gusto, and that apparently includes adopting America's most popular sport. Now, the Puppy Bowl is set to return for its 21st year on Sunday, considered one of the cutest competitions of the year. The annual 3-hour show will feature 142 rescue puppies. Among the players is the first ever St. Bernard mix named Julep. Julep and Pekingese pup Smosh will represent Team Fluff. Meanwhile, Pug Chihuahua mix Mr. Pickles and Chihuahua German Shepherd mix Tuani will lead Team Rough. The competitors, the competition's most valuable puppy and winner of the Underdog Award will be named at the end of the game. The Puppy Bowl's mission is to inspire families across the country to adopt puppies in need of a loving home. The event will be broadcast across multiple networks starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. For around-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app, and be sure to stick around for NTD Newsroom at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll cover more stories from the U.S. and around the world. Thank you for watching.